Chapter 4194. If the ceremony was not held, Ji Tianqing could stay for another month or so until the situation was completely stabilized, and then he could leave the boundless heaven continent. But if the ceremony was held, he would not be able to leave within 2 months. After all, the leaders of the 20 forces of the rebel alliance, as well as hundreds of domain masters, had to be present. The preparations for the ceremony would also take a long time. Ji Tianqing estimated that 2 months would be very fast. He agreed to hold the ceremony and named it the Boundless Heaven Universal Ceremony. It not only represented the change of ownership of the Boundless Heaven continent and his succession to the position of overlord, but also meant that hundreds of millions of people had regained their freedom and that the whole world would celebrate. The Boundless Heaven Universal Ceremony would still be hosted by the Nangong clan, and all the forces would cooperate. As for Ji Tianqing himself, he would still be a hands-off boss, and only needed to command and make decisions. Nangong Buhua did not feel that it was tiring or busy. Instead, he happily acknowledged the order and went to draft the preliminary regulations. He was well aware that as the vice leader of the anti-rebellious alliance, he had to do everything himself. After all, after the Boundless Heaven Universal Ceremony ended and the situation on the continent stabilized, Ji Tianqing would leave to rescue the other continents. At that time, all the affairs of the Boundless Heaven continent would be managed and handled by him. If he could not even handle such a small matter, he would find it troublesome and busy. Then how could Ji Tianqing rest assured that he would be in charge of the entire Boundless Heaven continent? He had to show enough ability to be qualified for the position of deputy chief, so that Ji Tianqing would be assured and the other 19 forces would be convinced. Nangong Buhua was very efficient. After just half a day, he brought the newly drafted regulations to Ji Tianqing for a look. The two discussed in the study for 2 hours, and Ji Tianqing made some changes and additions to the regulations he had drafted. Some of the matters that Nangong Buhua did not consider thoroughly were further improved by Ji Tianqing. In this way, the two finalized the specific rules of Haotian's ecumenical ceremony, and Nangong Buhua began to carry out his task. He first used the name of Ji Tianqing to send a message to the 19 forces under the rebel alliance and over 100 domain masters to inform them of the time of the ceremony. Then, he mobilized more than 1,000 people of the Nangong clan and rushed to the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven to carry out the mission. He was going to lead 2,000 disciples to set up the venue of the ceremony in advance and do the preparatory work. The venue was near the entrance of the 9 Guards Cave Heaven, but it was not between the mountains and the earth, but above the vast sea of clouds. When the time came, the huge venue would not only have to accommodate the disciples of the 20 forces, but also nearly 100 region masters and their entourage. It would also have to accommodate millions of commoners. The venue above the sea of clouds had a radius of at least 1,000 miles. It was completely formed by cloud platforms and supported by a great formation. If he wanted to make the venue appear sacred and dignified, he would have to spend a lot of time and effort to set up many complicated formations and decorate it with many materials. It would take at least a month for the 2,000 disciples of the Nangong clan to do all these complicated and trivial things. In addition, the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven also needed a large number of guards, both to guard the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven and to show the prestige of the Kenshin. The requirements for the guards were higher. They had to be at least an upper-level divine lord. The captain of the guards and the governor had to be at least a divine king. Most importantly, they had to recruit at least 5,000 guards to not look shabby. Even the 20 forces under the command of the anti-rebels alliance would not be able to gather so many elite guards in such a short time. This was a difficult task. Fortunately, Nangong Buhua requested Ji Tianqing to announce to the world that they could openly recruit guards and form an army. Ji Tianqing, of course, nodded in agreement. He did not have to do the selection and assessment of the guards. He would leave it to Nangong Buhua. Nangong Buhua felt a little pressured, but he still accepted the task and promised to complete it on time. He had thought that it would be difficult to complete this task. But he did not expect that 2 days after Kenshin's decree, many divine lords and divine kings would come to the 9 imperial grotto heaven to participate in the assessment. After asking around, Nangong Buhua found out that the divine lords and divine kings from all over the world had already arrived near the 9 imperial grotto heaven. They had already thought of this half a month ago, so they had made preparations in advance. Nangong Buhua was relieved. He felt gratified and secretly relieved. The so-called assessment was very simple. There was no need to compete in an arena. It was mainly to test the divine lords and divine kings' strength, divine powers, and dharma spells to find out their background, and conduct. Those who met the requirements would be selected based on merit, and those who did not would be eliminated. The divine lords and divine kings who were selected would have to swear a heavenly Tao oath that Ji Tianqing had specially made to pass the assessment. The heavenly Tao oath was very strict and solemn, but it was not excessive. In other words, he'd already grasped half of the 3,000 grand Taos that had circulated in the world since the heavens and the earth were split apart. How inconceivable was this? Ji Tianqing couldn't help but guess that probably only the 5 great god emperors were capable of grasping so many divine Tao laws, right? Ordinary peak divine kings did not even dare to think about it. The next day, Haotian's universal ceremony was held as scheduled. Outside the 9 defense caves, under the blue sky, in the white sea of clouds. The cloud platform, which had a radius of 1,000 miles, was beautifully decorated. It was like a fairyland in the heavens, like a dream. On the cloud platform, there were all kinds of decorations and exquisite buildings, pleasing the people who came to watch the ceremony. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that all kinds of exquisite sculptures, buildings, and decorations made of white clouds were the work of master craftsmen. Not only was it perfect for viewing, but it was also very practical. The entire cloud platform looked illusory and ethereal, but it actually formed a powerful divine array, which had super strong defense and power. More than 100 people and people from all over the world scattered around the cloud platform to watch the ceremony. They watched the ceremony with pious hearts, excitement, and respect. It was their greatest honor and pride to be able to witness Kenshin's elegance with their own eyes. The guards of the 9 defense caves had already been distributed around the cloud platform, wearing armor and holding swords, looking solemn and dignified. But the people were emotional, but orderly, and there were no disturbances. Nearly 1,000 first-rate forces from all over the world, and more than 1,000 emperors of the divine kingdoms, also came to watch the ceremony. They presented generous gifts to the 9 defense caves in order to express their respect and congratulations to Kenshin. 100 domain masters, escorted by the personal guards, also presented their gifts and congratulated Ji Tianqing. As for the 20 forces under the rebel alliance, they also presented gifts and congratulations to Ji Tianqing at this grand ceremony. Ji Tianqing sat on the magnificent and sacred throne, accepting the worship of thousands of people and the congratulations of more than 1,000 forces. Nangong Buhua, the deputy leader of the alliance, and the governor of the guards stood behind him. Nangong Nihuang and the elders of the various forces stood on both sides of the platform like guards, waiting for orders at any time. In this way, even if it was boring for Ji Tianqing to sit there, it would not be too tiring. Accepting and registering the gifts from the various forces would naturally be done by his subordinates. He only needed to sit on the throne. After the gifts were presented, more than half a day had passed. Chapter 4196. It was obvious that Nangong Nihuang did not ask this question on the spur of the moment. This question had been hidden in her heart for a long time, and it was only today that she mustered up the courage to ask. The study was very quiet, and only she and Ji Tianqing were in the room. Her expression, eyes, and tone all contained an indescribable and inexplicable meaning. Any normal man would be able to feel her meaning and thoughts. But Ji Tianqing's expression did not change, and his eyes were still clear. He slowly drank his tea and nodded naturally. Yes. The boundless heaven continent has been saved, but the people of the other 4 continents are still in deep trouble. And the news has already spread, and the people of those continents are all eagerly waiting. The powerhouses and domain masters guarding those continents will definitely make corresponding preparations and reactions. The longer I delay, the more prepared they will be, and things will be more troublesome in the future. Seeing Ji Tianqing's calm expression and serious tone analyzing the situation, Nangong Ni Huang sighed silently in her heart. He was obviously worried and concerned about these things at all times. It was not that Ji Tianqing did not understand the situation, or that there was anything wrong with him. On the contrary, the more serious he was and the more he cared about the people of the world, the more Nangong Ni Huang admired him. But this also proved that Ji Tianqing did not have any other thoughts about her. In Ji Tianqing's heart, she could not be compared to the general trend of the world and the hundreds of millions of people. This made Nangong Ni Huang a little disappointed, and she also felt a little bitter in her heart. But she would not give up easily, and she had already thought of a response. She mustered up her courage and said, "Alliance Master has the world in mind and is determined to save all the people of the heavenly realm and return freedom to the world." Ni Huang really admires such breadth of mind and courage. The situation of the boundless heaven continent has been settled. With my father, the patriarchs of the various clans, and many domain masters, there should not be any problems. But Alliance Master, if you go to the other continents alone, and the other party is prepared, it will be very difficult for you to start an uprising. Ni Huang is willing to follow Alliance Master to conquer the world. I can serve you by your side, and I am also willing to lead troops into battle, kill the enemy, and share your worries. I hope Alliance Master can fulfill my wish. The meaning of these words was very clear. There was nothing left to do in the boundless heaven continent, so Nangong Ni Huang wanted to follow Ji Tianqing. Regardless of whether it was to serve him or to lead troops into battle, as long as they could follow Ji Tianqing, it would be fine. To put it bluntly, she was willing to hand herself over to Ji Tianqing for him to arrange and dispatch as he pleased. As a dignified, elegant, and somewhat reserved woman, it took a lot of courage for Nangong Ni Huang to say such words. Before this, she had hesitated and struggled for more than a month before making up her mind. At this moment, after she finished speaking, she felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off her shoulders. She was so nervous that she even forgot to breathe. She held her breath and stared at Ji Tianqing, waiting for Ji Tianqing's reply. However, Ji Tianqing did not look at her expression and reaction. Instead, he got up and walked to the window. With his hands behind his back, he looked out the window with a complicated expression. With his back to Nangong Ni Huang, he said in a calm and slightly low tone, "Miss Nangong, you and I have only known each other for a short time, and we have only met a few times. Why do you trust me so much? So much so that you have to leave your family and friends and travel to other continents?" Hearing him say this, Nangong Ni Huang was about to express her feelings. However, Ji Tianqing didn't wait for her to speak and continued, "I've said before that I'm not alone. You've also seen it in the previous battle. Not only did my family follow me, but some friends also followed me. As for the other 4 continents, I also have some old friends and subordinates. Naturally, I will not fight alone. Therefore, you should stay to assist your father and help him manage the boundless heaven continent. To be able to maintain the peace and stability of the boundless heaven continent is also to share my worries, understand?" The meaning he expressed was still considered tactful. In fact, he was reminding Nangong Ni Huang that he already had a family, and his wife and children were by his side. He could not accept Nangong Ni Huang's admiration and pursuit, and he hoped that Nangong Ni Huang would back off. Nangong Ni Huang naturally understood what he meant, and the scene of the decisive battle a few months ago appeared in her mind. At that time, she had paid attention to Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Ji Wuhan, and Ji Wushuang. She knew that they were Ji Tianqing's wife and children. While she was amazed by Yun Yao and Ji Ku's charm, she was also very envious. Of course, the two sides did not have much contact. She admired and envied Yun Yao and Ji Ku, but it was not to the extent that she felt ashamed of her inferiority. After all, she was also a peerless beauty in the boundless heaven continent. After being tactfully rejected by Ji Tianqing, Nangong Nihuang was a little disappointed and dejected, but she did not show any resentment or dissatisfaction, nor did she dispel the idea of following Ji Tianqing. She revealed a gentle smile and said to Ji Tianqing, "Alliance Master, I know that we have known each other and worked together for too short a time, and we have not experienced trials and hardships yet." Chapter 4197. This time, Ji Tianqing's words were very direct and not tactful. He wanted Nangong Nihuang to understand how dangerous it was to follow him to battle the God realm and deal with the 5 God emperors. He knew in his heart that with his reputation and prestige in the God realm, as long as he raised his arm and called for help, there would definitely be a swarm of followers. However, those who could follow by his side could not be ordinary people. They had to be loyal and trustworthy. Therefore, he would not easily agree or accept anyone as his follower. As for Nangong Nihuang, Nangong Ao, Zhan Wudi, Lan Kai, Yuqi Pe, and the others, he still hoped that they would retreat in the face of difficulties. However, Nangong Nihuang had already made up her mind and was determined to follow him. "Alliance Master, we all know what you said, and we have already thought it through. However, we are not afraid of death. To be able to follow the famous Kenshin and fight the 5 most powerful God emperors in the world, even if we die in the void, we will have no regrets. In this world, some people covet power, some people covet fame and fortune, and even more people are greedy for life and afraid of death. However, we do not want to live an ordinary and mediocre life. We only want to have a beautiful and brilliant experience so that our lives can bloom with dazzling brilliance. Even if, our lives will be very short." When Nangong Nihuang said these words, her expression was solemn as she stared at Ji Tianqing, her eyes shining brightly. Ji Tianqing could see that these were all words from the bottom of her heart, and there was not the slightest bit of falsehood. To be honest, he was somewhat touched. At this moment, Nangong Nihuang saw that he was silent, so she turned and opened the door of the study. "Come in. Tell the Alliance Master personally." She said these words to the several God kings outside the study. Ji Tianqing turned and saw several young God kings of different appearances step into the study one after another. These young God kings were the people that Nangong Nihuang had mentioned just now. Nangong Ao, Zhan Wudi, Lan Kai, and Yuqi Pe. Obviously, when Nangong Nihuang and Ji Tianqing were discussing in the study, these 4 young God kings were waiting outside the study for the results. The 5 of them had already discussed this and chose Nangong Nihuang to express their wishes. It had to be said that this method was indeed effective. "Greetings, Alliance Master." The 4 young God kings stood in a row in the study room and bowed to Ji Tianqing. Then, without waiting for Ji Tianqing to say anything, they said in unison, "Lord Alliance Leader, please allow us to follow you to conquer the celestial realm and fulfill our dreams." Nangong Nihuang had already explained their reasons and thoughts, so there was no need to elaborate. Ji Tianqing was a little surprised that they called it their dream. Seeing their similarly bright eyes and the same determined attitude as Nangong Nihuang, Ji Tianqing was a little hesitant. Originally, he wanted to reject them, but after thinking about it, he decided to give them a chance. "I hope that all of you have seriously considered this matter and not made this decision on the spur of the moment. All of you must think carefully. Follow me and leave the boundless heaven continent to conquer the divine realm and challenge the 5 God emperors. This means that all of you will give up glory, wealth, and stability and risk your lives." As soon as Ji Tianqing finished speaking, Nangong Ao, Zhan Wudi, and the other 3 quickly nodded and replied firmly, "Please rest assured, Alliance Master. We have thought it through carefully." Since these 4 guys were so determined and swore to follow him and would rather die than retreat, what else could Ji Tianqing say? After staring at them for a while, he could only nod in agreement. I have said what needs to be said. Since all of you are so determined, I will fulfill your wishes. All of you may leave. Go and make preparations to say goodbye to your friends and relatives. In about 10 days, I will send a message to inform you. Seeing that Ji Tianqing had finally agreed, the matter was settled. The 4 young god kings were full of joy and quickly bowed to thank him. Then, Nangong Nihuang and the 4 young god kings left the study room together. After they walked out of the study room, Nangong Ao and the others looked at Nangong Nihuang with concern. They wanted to know if there was a result of her discussion with Kenshin. Nangong Ao knew the inside story and even cast an inquiring look at Nangong Nihuang, asking her if Kenshin had agreed. Nangong Nihuang pretended not to see everyone's expressions and eyes and said calmly, "Everyone, our dreams will be realized soon. Next, we have 10 days to prepare and say goodbye to our friends and relatives. Everyone, don't waste time. After all, this should be the first time we leave the boundless heaven continent and go to other continents." After saying that, she waved goodbye to Nangong Ao and the others and quickly left. Even though she pretended as if nothing had happened, Nangong Ao and the others knew that she and Kenshin had talked alone for so long in the study room and must have expressed their feelings. Since she did not mention this matter and her eyes and back looked a little lonely, it was conceivable that the result would be disappointing. Thinking of this, the 4 young god kings could not help but shake their heads and sigh. While sympathizing with Nangong Nihuang, they were also puzzled. As the 4 walked into the distance, they discussed telepathically. "Do you think Miss Nangong has expressed her feelings to the Alliance Master?" Chapter 4198. Although it was useless to only rely on words to govern the entire boundless heaven continent. No matter how high Ji Tianqing's prestige was, and no matter how reasonable and intimidating his words were, it was difficult to make all the territorial lords obey him. To truly control the boundless heaven continent, one still needed a clear system of rewards and punishments, clear and strict rules and laws, as well as powerful strength and abundant resources, and so on. However, this was the first time the 100 territorial lords had gathered to meet Ji Tianqing face to face, so they still had to go through the process. Ji Tianqing carried out the meeting in an orderly manner according to the established procedures. The 100 domain lords had all sworn the oath of surrender, and they were all very respectful. They also agreed to Ji Tianqing's instructions and requests without hesitation, saying that they would definitely complete the task and would not disappoint Kenshin. Just like that, the meeting ended after 4 hours. It was late at night. Ji Tianqing left the meeting hall and returned to his residence to meditate and cultivate. The 100 territorial lords dispersed. Some stayed in the cave abode temporarily, while others went to meet the clan leaders and sect masters of the 20 forces. This grand ceremony also gave the territorial lords, clan leaders, and sect masters a chance to meet face to face. Even if those territorial lords wanted to curry favor with those clan leaders and sect masters, Ji Tianqing did not care. In his opinion, it would also be helpful to maintain the stability of the boundless heaven continent if the territorial lords, clan leaders, and sect masters became closer to each other. Anyway, these people had all sworn the oath of surrender, so no one dared to do anything out of line. Ji Tianqing was completely at ease. This grand ceremony lasted for 3 days and 3 nights before it ended. On the 4th day, more than 1 million people left one after another. Next, the 100 territorial lords also bade farewell to Ji Tianqing and left the 9-palace grotto heaven with their guards. On the 5th day, more than a dozen leaders of the ancient clans and sects also bade farewell to Ji Tianqing and left. On the 6th day, only the guard army and a few hundred disciples of the Nangong clan were left in the 9-palace grotto heaven. The grand ceremony was over, and more than 1 million people had left. However, the venue had to be demolished and cleaned, so it was naturally done by these people. Nangong Buhua led more than 6,000 men and entered a tense and busy state. After 2 months of tempering and experimenting, he had already entered the state long ago and practically took over the affairs of the boundless heaven continent. Almost every day, there would be memorials and letters sent to the 9 defense grotto heaven from various regions, forces, and empires. Nangong Buhua would personally look through the numerous official affairs and make appropriate decisions. He would only ask for Ji Tianqing's advice when he couldn't make up his mind or when he had a difficult decision to make. Of course, now that the situation in the boundless heaven continent was stable, this kind of major event would also become fewer and fewer. On the 10th day, the venue and the subsequent cleanup work were all finished. The 9 royals' cave abode was peaceful again. At noon, Ji Tianqing steered the god-slaying battleship and took Nangong Nihuang, Nangong Ao, Zhan Wudi, Lan Kai, Yuchi and the others out of the 9 imperial grotto heaven. Today was the day of his departure. Nangong Buhua, the captains of the guard corps, and the governors sent him out of the 9 defenses cave heaven and into the vast sky. After the god-slaying battleship disappeared into the horizon, Nangong Buhua brought everyone back to the 9 defense grotto heaven and continued to handle the complicated official affairs. Although the leaders of the 20 ancient clans and sects all knew that Ji Tianqing was leaving today and heading to other continents. Previously, the various forces had also expressed that they were willing to send hundreds of elites to follow Ji Tianqing into battle. After all, they were all under the command of the rebel alliance. If each of them sent hundreds of people, they would have an army of 10,000 people in total. However, Ji Tianqing rejected everyone's suggestion and only brought Nangong Nihuang and the others with him instead of a large group of soldiers. Moreover, apart from Nangong Buhua, no one knew his goal and whereabouts at the moment. The god-slaying battleship had been flying in the sky for 2 hours. Nangong Ao, Zhan Wudi, and the others couldn't help but urge Nangong Nihuang to ask Ji Tianqing where they were heading to. Seeing the 4 young god kings' expectant and curious faces, Nangong Nihuang coldly reprimanded them. If the alliance leader wants us to know where we are going next, he will naturally tell us. Since the alliance leader didn't tell everyone, it means that the goal still needs to be kept a secret. You guys are so anxious to know the alliance leader's goal. Aren't you afraid of leaking the secret and ruining the alliance leader's plans? After being rebuked by her, the 4 young god kings were embarrassed and speechless. All right. You are still the most thoughtful. We were reckless. You are a girl. You are right. But, Miss Nangong, don't you want to know which continent the alliance leader is going to attack? Nangong Nihuang didn't hesitate and replied expressionlessly, I don't want to. No matter which continent the alliance leader is going to attack, he has his reasons. What we need to do is listen to his arrangements and execute his orders, not speculate about what the alliance leader is going to do. There's no way to continue this conversation. Chapter 4199. Time always passed quickly during peaceful days. Half a month passed in a flash. The boundless heaven continent returned to peace, and even the undercurrent was gradually disappearing. The remaining forces of the imperial tutor and the Azura god emperor were mostly wiped out, except for a few who escaped to other continents. The ancient clans, top forces, and sects that had once maintained a neutral and wait-and-see attitude obediently went into hiding, as if they were hiding from the world. Now that the boundless heaven continent was Kenshin's territory, they did not dare to have any ideas. It would be good enough if they were not punished by Kenshin. After all, the 20 forces and 100 territorial masters under Kenshin were unprecedentedly loyal to Kenshin. As long as Kenshin gave the order, he did not need to be famous at all. The forces under his command could sweep away all obstacles. Due to Kenshin's supreme prestige and the fact that 90% of the people supported and believed in him, the replacement of the system and laws of the boundless heaven continent was also proceeding exceptionally smoothly. Nangong Buhua was extremely busy every day, but he never complained about being tired. Instead, he enjoyed it. Because Kenshin trusted him and completely handed over the boundless heaven continent to him. And he could use his own ability to govern the boundless heaven continent to become more perfect, peaceful, and beautiful. It was also a very fulfilling thing. This could not only prove his talent and ability to Kenshin, many ancient clans, and the people of the boundless heaven continent. Thousands of years later, tens of thousands of years later, he would still be able to leave his name in history. This was the lifelong pursuit and dream of many immortal king experts. At the same time, the god-slaying battleship crossed half of the boundless heaven continent and arrived at the southern border. If they flew another 10,000 miles forward, they would arrive at the vast Xiaolong territorial waters. At this time, Nangong Ao, Zhan Wudi, Lan Kai, and the others who had been cultivating in the room gathered together to discuss quietly. They were discussing the same topic. Which continent would Kenshin attack? We are at the south of the continent, and the Xiaolong territorial waters are in front of us. Now it seems that the leader's target can only be the Reincarnation Island or the boundless heaven continent. That's right. The Qinkuan continent is to our east. If the leader wants to attack the Qinkuan continent, he must pass through the Wuxia territorial waters. The primal chaos continent is the furthest away from us. Not only are there two sea regions between us, there is also the Reincarnation Island between us. Therefore, the Qinkuan continent and the primal chaos continent can be eliminated. Since I have to choose between the Reincarnation Island and the Firmament Land, I will choose the Firmament Land. That's because as long as we keep flying south, we'll be able to reach it in half a month. According to what you said, we can reach the Reincarnation Island in half a month if we head southeast. I think it's more likely that the Alliance Master will choose Reincarnation Island. After all, the territory of the Reincarnation Island is even smaller. With the number of people we have, it won't be too difficult to take over the Reincarnation Island. If we attack the Firmament continent, I feel that we have too few people. You're worrying for nothing, aren't you? With the prestige of our Alliance Master, as long as we raise our arms and call for action, who would dare to disobey? I'm afraid that as soon as we arrive at the Firmament continent, as soon as the Alliance Master shows his name, there will be thousands of experts coming to join us. The four young god kings were gathered in a room, arguing endlessly around a jade table. When they were thirsty, they would even brew a cup of tea to drink. At this moment, Nangong Nihuang's voice suddenly came from outside the door. The four of you, don't hide inside and whisper. The Alliance Master has ordered that he has an important task for us. Open the door. Nangong Nihuang's somewhat cold and mature voice made the four young god kings who were whispering immediately restrain their expressions. They immediately resumed their upright and still posture, as if they had done nothing at all. Nangong Ao took the initiative to open the door, and Nangong Nihuang walked in with a few jade slips. As usual, she was swift and decisive. She didn't talk nonsense with them and directly threw the four jade slips on the jade table. Each of you will have a jade slip. Inside it are the 3 super skills that the Alliance Master has imparted to us. They are used to hide one's aura, disguise one's appearance, and investigate. The Alliance Master has asked us to comprehend and master the 3 super skills within 20 days. Because in 20 days, we will use these super skills and secret skills to carry out an important task. The 4 young god kings were stunned for a moment. Then, they revealed expressions of surprise and disbelief. They subconsciously picked up the jade slips and read the super skills recorded inside. Nangong Nihuang crossed her arms in front of her, hugging the huge sin. She looked down at everyone and said with an indifferent expression, "There is no need to doubt. I have carefully examined and studied them. They are all super skills of the king level. Every single one of these secret magics can be considered as the most powerful secret magics of our clans." A simple sentence was enough to prove how exquisite and precious the 3 super skills that Ji Tianqing had imparted to them were. The 4 young god kings were ecstatic as if they had been hit by a heaven-shaking prize. They immediately became emotional, and their excitement overflowed. However, Nangong Ao was the first to react. His surprise and excitement turned into a helpless and self-mocking smile. 3 sets of supreme-grade king-level ultimate skills. He actually wants us to master them in just 20 days. Does the Alliance Master have some misunderstanding about us? He can't be thinking that we have heaven-defying comprehension and aptitude like him, right? The other 3 also reacted, and the joy in their hearts disappeared in an instant, and was replaced by a helpless expression. To be honest, the Alliance Master thinks too highly of us. Although we are listed as the 10 heavenly kings of the younger generation in the boundless heaven continent. But to be honest, in front of the Alliance Master's standards and requirements, we are just trash. Master these 3 super skills in 20 days. What the hell? It's already amazing that I can understand and memorize it smoothly. They had just been hit by a huge surprise, but in the blink of an eye, they realized that they were too weak to digest this gift. One could imagine how the 4 young god kings felt. Fortunately, Nangong Nihuang saw that they were so depressed and timely enlightened them. Since the Alliance Master is sure that we can complete it, then we can definitely do it. Everyone, don't worry. Other than the 3 super skills, there are also the Alliance Master's insights and cultivation experiences in the Jade Slips. I suggest that everyone first memorize the 3 super skills before learning the Alliance Master's insights. It should be twice the result with half the effort. The few young god kings hurriedly used their divine senses to explore the Jade Slips. Indeed, they found that there were a few insights recorded in the Jade Slips. Instantly, the 4 of them heaved a huge sigh of relief. They revealed expressions of relief and regained their joyful smiles. Phew. The Alliance Master is so considerate. He almost scared me to death. Look at how useless you are. I was already mentally prepared. If the Alliance Master says we can do it, then we can definitely do it. We have to do it even if we can't. Brothers, the Alliance Master has given us such a valuable gift. We can't disappoint the Alliance Master, and we can't embarrass the clan. Alright, don't waste time. Start cultivating in seclusion right away. Chapter 4200. With 3 top-notch techniques, the 4 young divine kings stopped discussing which continent Ji Tianqing was going to attack. Ji Tianqing trusted them so much and had such high hopes for them. He had even given them such a surprise gift. They knew that it would be too embarrassing if they couldn't master 3 divine abilities within 20 days. Most importantly, they would betray the Alliance leader's trust and lose to the others. Therefore, without needing Nangong Nihuang to say anything, the 4 of them put away the Jade Slips and went back to their rooms to cultivate. Nangong Nihuang didn't stay idle either. She also went back to her room and entered the secret room to cultivate. After all, she was a woman. She was more meticulous and better at figuring out Ji Tianqing's thoughts. While the 4 of them were still discussing where Ji Tianqing was going to attack, she already had an answer in her heart. It wasn't the Firmament Continent, it was the Reincarnation Island. She also guessed that Ji Tianqing wanted them to master the 3 techniques as soon as possible so that they could go to the Reincarnation Island to carry out the investigation mission. She had even been thinking about how to help Ji Tianqing during this time. She had been deducing and imagining how she would deploy the attack on the Reincarnation Island if she was the one planning it. The first step she could think of was to hide after entering the Reincarnation Island and send out elite experts to scout for information. She had to understand the situation on the Reincarnation Island and the forces under the command of the god of the underworld before coming up with a plan. The next plan of action could be based on Ji Tianqing's process of conquering the boundless heaven continent. Of course, she would use the name of Kenshin to contact the major ancient clans and top forces on the Reincarnation Island. No matter what method she used, she would first win over a group of experts and forces to be the foundation of the attack on the Reincarnation Island. Next, she would attack and subdue the leaders of the various territories on the Reincarnation Island one by one. When the forces grew stronger, things would become much simpler. Nangong Nihuang deduced the process and steps. After repeated verification, she felt that there shouldn't be much of a deviation. Then, she painstakingly deduced the details of every step of the plan, trying to minimize the flaws and omissions. Just like this, she had already unknowingly recorded a large amount of information in the jade slip. If Ji Tianqing asked her to come up with a plan as soon as possible, or the deployment of the attack on the Reincarnation Island, she only needed to tidy it up a little before presenting it to Ji Tianqing. As for now, she didn't have to think about these questions anymore. After she collected her thoughts, she focused on comprehending the three divine abilities. Although she was not as strong as Nangong Ao, Zhan Wudi, and the others. However, she was also very unyielding. She was determined to surpass those four fellows and not be looked down upon by them. The deity-slaying battleship kept flying non-stop. After entering the Xiaolong Sea area, it continued to fly southeast. Just as Nangong Nihuang had speculated, the god-slaying battleship's target was the Reincarnation Island. Even though the battleship had been hurrying along, the interior of the battleship was very quiet. Everyone was focused on cultivating. Only the white dragon was left alone in the cockpit, controlling the battleship alone. Ji Tianqing had already entered the distorted spacetime of the Divine Pagoda to continue cultivating and comprehending the Heaven Punishment Divine Technique. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others had all suffered some injuries during the battle in the Shura Cave Heaven. In the past 3 months, they had been cultivating in seclusion in the distorted spacetime. After more than 10 years, their injuries had basically healed. It was worth mentioning that Ji Wuhan's heaven-defying talent and potential were truly displayed after he broke through to the Divine King Realm. It had been less than a year since he broke through to the Divine King Realm. He had only cultivated in the distorted spacetime for more than 30 years. Now, he had broken through to the second level of the Divine King Realm. With his talent and speed of breakthrough, the miracle of breaking through one level per year would probably happen in the next few years. From Ji Tianqing to Bai Feng, Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Nangong Nihuang, and the others, to Ji Wuhan and Ji Wushuang, everyone was working hard to cultivate and become stronger. At this time, the Reincarnation Island, the Firmament Mainland, and the Qiankuan Mainland were in a state of worry, excitement, and anticipation. These three mainlands were located in the east, southeast, and south of the Boundless Heaven Mainland respectively. They were the same distance from the Boundless Heaven Mainland. Since a few months ago, the news of the Kenshin and the Rebel Alliance had spread to these three mainlands. Many experts and forces had heard the news. Later on, the Rebel Alliance had won successive battles, and the Imperial Tutor was completely helpless. In the end, the Shura God Emperor's clone was killed by the Kenshin. The Imperial Tutor and his army were annihilated, and the entire Boundless Heaven Mainland was controlled by the Kenshin. A series of news spread across the three mainlands. Not only did the top experts and forces know, but even the common people knew. The bigwigs and territorial lords who controlled the mainlands were naturally worried. They were as anxious as ants on a hot pan, but they did not know what to do. They knew very well that the Kenshin had already publicly announced that they would overthrow the dark reign of the five-god emperor, rescue the five mainlands of the heavenly realm, and let all the people of the heavenly realm regain their freedom. Then, they, the god emperor's lackeys, would naturally be the targets of the Kenshin's beating and killing. However, the Kenshin's strength was so terrifying that even the clones of the five-god emperor were killed. Ordinary people like them could only be killed by the Kenshin. After thinking about it, they could not find any way to stop the Kenshin's attack. They could only pray that the Kenshin would attack the other mainlands first and give them a little more time. When the common people of the three mainlands heard this series of news, they were wild with excitement and rushed to spread the news. Their hearts were filled with excitement and anticipation. They naturally hated the dark reign of the five-god emperor, but because of their low status and strength, they could only swallow their anger. Now, Kenshin raised his arms and shouted loudly. Heroes gathered and successfully occupied the boundless heaven continent, ending the dark reign of the Azura god emperor. This allowed all the common people to see the hope of escaping the sea of suffering and embracing freedom. Every day, they hoped that the Kenshin would arrive on their mainlands as soon as possible, overthrow the God Emperor's rule, and return their freedom. In this way, the common people of the three mainlands were already praising Kenshin's prowess and praying that he would appear as soon as possible, even before he started attacking the next mainland. If it were any other expert, they might not have such an effect. At the very least, they would not be able to win the respect and worship of hundreds of millions of people of the heavenly realm. It could not be helped. Kenshin's prowess was too great. It could be said that he was a household name in the heavenly realm. Kenshin's noble character was also respected and admired by hundreds of millions of people. The common people of the three mainlands had already regarded him as the savior of the world, the saint who stood on behalf of the Tianqing. On the other side, in the center of the Reincarnation Island, in the sacred and dignified Yuta city, Commander Styx and Marshal Blood Prison had already gathered the 6 great divine generals and the 18 region lords to discuss countermeasures. In addition, the 9 ancient clans on the Reincarnation Island had also received an invitation from Commander Styx to participate in the discussion on how to deal with the Kenshin's attack. However, only 3 ancient clans were willing to head to Yudu. The other 6 were vague and made excuses. Chapter 4201. The 3 ancient clans that were ordered to rush to Yudu to discuss how to fight against the Kenshin had long pledged allegiance to the god of the underworld. Even if the god of the underworld's true body wasn't on Reincarnation Island, they still had to obey the orders of Commander Mingi and Marshal Blood Prison. The meeting hall of Yuta Divine Palace was brightly lit, and the atmosphere was solemn. Commander Mingi, Marshal Blood Prison, 6 great generals, 18 region masters, and the strong practitioners of the 3 ancient clans were gathered in the hall. The dozens of Divine King's strong practitioners in the hall were the most powerful and authoritative rulers of Reincarnation Island. They could mobilize 80% of the strong practitioners and military forces of Reincarnation Island. Logically speaking, with so many strong practitioners united and gathered together to discuss several countermeasures and plans, they should be confident in defending against the Kenshin's attack. However, after an entire day of discussion, they still couldn't decide which plan to execute. No one had the confidence to defend against the Kenshin's possible attack. The only thing that everyone was sure of was that among the Firmament Continent, the Qiankuan Continent, and the Reincarnation Island, Sword God was most likely to attack the Reincarnation Island. The first reason was that Reincarnation Island had the smallest territory and the weakest power among the 3 continents, making it the easiest to attack. The second reason was that Reincarnation Island was located in the center of the God world. The other 4 continents were located in the northwest, northeast, southeast, and southwest directions of Reincarnation Island. The distance from Reincarnation Island to any of the continents wasn't too far. In other words, Reincarnation Island was the core of the God world, the most important continent. As long as he occupied the Reincarnation Island, the Sword God would be able to attack any continent he wished. He would be able to advance or retreat as he wished. Therefore, Commander Mingi and Marshal Blood Prison were very sure that Kenshin would attack Reincarnation Island first. However, the problem was that Kenshin hadn't shown up yet, and there was no news about it. No one knew when Kenshin would attack, or what method or scheme they would use to attack. Therefore, it was difficult for them to take specific precautions. Commander Mingi and Marshal Blood Prison could only make some arrangements to strengthen the defense of Yudu and keep the 18 regions on alert. Originally, the Blood Hell Marshal wanted the 18 domain lords to stay in their respective regions and lead the soldiers to be on guard and strengthen their defenses. However, Commander Mingi suggested that when Kenshin attacked the Boundless Heaven continent, they would attack the regions one by one and force the region masters to surrender. This method made the Imperial Tutor helpless. If they didn't learn their lesson, Kenshin would definitely repeat the same trick and conquer the 18 regions. Therefore, Commander Mingi requested the 18 region masters to stay in Yudu and control their own regions would be controlled remotely. Only a small portion of their opinions to stay would to do so to twos. Those who agreed to stay in Yudu were to their territories were to stay in the region to stay. To be agreed to stay twos to be to stay to give to their territories and to be controlled to be to stay. Of them was to be woods to be safe to be to stay. However, their own territories were to be given to the Kenshin. Without them, the soldiers under their command wouldn't be able to defend against the Kenshin's attack. Commander Mingi refuted them on the spot. Even if they stayed to guard their own territories, they wouldn't be able to defend against the Kenshin's attack. Many of the region masters were choked to the point that they couldn't refute, and their expressions turned ugly. Although they didn't say anything, they were still unconvinced and muttered to themselves, even if we stay in Yudu, can we really fight against the Kenshin? Even if all of us work together, I'm afraid we won't be able to defeat the Kenshin, right? Seeing that the region masters were speechless, Martial Blood Prison couldn't say anything more. He could only follow Commander Mingi's suggestion and let the 18 region masters stay in Yudu. However, each region master could transfer a portion of their loyal soldiers to Yudu to set up defenses. This way, these region masters would have soldiers under their command. Only then would they feel safe and be willing to compromise. Commander Mingi agreed to this suggestion, but he also raised a condition. That was to bring the families of each region master to Yudu. In name, it was to protect the families of the region masters. After all, Yudu city was safer. However, in reality, this was also a disguised form of coercion to force the region masters to listen to orders. In the end, Commander Mingi decided on a countermeasure in a domineering manner and ended the meeting. After the meeting ended, everyone started to move. They had to take advantage of the time before the Kenshin arrived at Reincarnation Island to complete the corresponding deployment and defense. 20 days passed in a flash. That evening, the god-slaying battleship silently landed on Reincarnation Island without attracting anyone's attention. At this time, Ji Tianxing had been cultivating in seclusion in the distorted spacetime for close to 3 years. His abilities had improved greatly again. Nangong Nihuang, Nangong Ao, Yuchipa, Lon Kai, Zhan Wudi, and the others also ended their seclusion. These 5 young divine kings all completed the tasks that Ji Tianxing had given them within the time limit. He wondered if they had been able to repair it after so many years. With Commander Styx and Martial Blood Prison's intelligence, they must have guessed that I would come to attack Reincarnation Island. I wonder how they would react. I'm afraid they don't have any good countermeasures and can only gather all the region masters and strong practitioners to hide in Yudu City and wait for me to appear. Yudu City in the evening was very quiet, and the atmosphere was even a little heavy. There were 4 gates in the north, south, east, and west, but only the south gate was open. The other 3 gates were closed. Moreover, there was only a narrow passageway at the south city gate, which was only wide enough for 1-horse carriage to pass through. Inside and outside the city gates, there were also 200 elite guards standing guard. They were all Divine Lord Realm experts. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that there were actually 10 Divine King Realm experts hidden among them. Through this point, Ji Tianxing could conclude that Yudu City was definitely heavily guarded and jittery at the slightest sound. It was probably because the commoners in the city had also felt the unusual aura of danger, so they didn't enter or leave the city. Occasionally, 1 or 2 commoners would leave the city, but they would also undergo strict interrogation and inspection. Ji Tianxing observed for a moment more and discovered that the defensive formation of Yudu City had also been activated. There were also 2 small-scale god formations at the city gates that were in an operating state. In this way, if there was any abnormality at the city gates, they could immediately seal it off with the formation. Luckily, when Ji Tianxing landed outside the city gates, he had already changed his appearance and concealed his aura. He even entered a state of invisibility. Even though he stood at the gates for 100 breaths of time, no one discovered him. After roughly understanding the situation in Yudu, he walked towards the city gates. The guards and Divine King realm experts guarding the city gates all stood on the spot with stern expressions. Without seeing anyone enter or leave the city gates, they naturally wouldn't move around casually. As a result, when Ji Tianqing walked past them, the distance between them was less than 6 feet. Yet, he wasn't discovered. The 2 king-level high-grade god formations at the city gates also couldn't detect Ji Tianqing's presence and didn't send out any alarms. In this way, Ji Tianqing easily entered Yudu's city. Under the setting sun, Yudu's city still looked the same as before. The city was majestic and vast. The streets in the city were straight and wide, crisscrossing and dividing the huge city into countless regions. In every square region, there were rows upon rows of palaces and residences, giving off a dignified and imposing aura. However, at this moment, Yudu's city was completely silent. It was no longer as bustling as before. There were no pedestrians on the streets. There were only scattered yellow leaves, making it look very desolate. The shops on the streets were all tightly shut, and no sound could be heard. The entire Yudu city seemed very quiet, as if it was an empty city. However, that wasn't the case. After Ji Tianqing used his consciousness to investigate, he discovered that in every palace and residence, there were hundreds or even thousands of commoners. However, those commoners were all hiding in underground palaces or secret chambers. They were either meditating quietly or cultivating in seclusion. It was obvious that the commoners knew what was about to happen. However, they didn't escape Yudu. Instead, they stayed and hid, waiting for the arrival of danger. After all, in the entire Reincarnation Island, Yudu was the safest. It didn't take long for night to fall. Ji Tianqing, who was in an invisible state, walked around Yudu's city casually, carefully investigating the situation in the city. For an entire night, he completely investigated Yudu's city, which had a radius of 1,000 miles. He was very clear about the layout of the buildings in the city, the distribution of the 100,000 soldiers, and the grades and numbers of the various formations. There were no secrets in the entire Yudu city in front of him. He studied it thoroughly. The facts proved that Yudu city was indeed in a state of extreme alert. Its defense was more than 5 times stronger than usual. Not only were there 100,000 elite soldiers gathered in the city, but there were also 100,000 city guards and more than 5,000 Divine Lord realm experts. As for Divine King realm experts, there were more than 200 of them, and most of them were gathered in the Divine Palace in the center of the city. The Reincarnation Divine Palace was the core of Yudu city and also the sacred ground of Reincarnation Island. The palace complex with a radius of 50 miles was the residence of Commander Mingi and Martial Blood Prison, and its defense was the tightest. A total of 50,000 elite soldiers and 3,000 Divine Lord realm experts guarded the Reincarnation Divine Palace day and night. In order not to alert the enemy, Ji Tianqing didn't rashly release his consciousness to investigate the situation in the Reincarnation Divine Palace. He was preparing to sneak into the Reincarnation Divine Palace to personally investigate and set up defenses. At this moment, Nangong Nihuang sent him a message to report the results of her investigation. Chapter 4203. Reporting to Alliance Master, after 8 days of searching and investigating, Ni Huang did not let you down and finally obtained the results. Cold Moon and Green Star domains are tight on the outside but loose on the inside. They seem to be in a state of panic and fear. In fact, most of the soldiers and generals left behind are of the middle and lower ranks. Their abilities are weak and there is nothing to fear. Half of the god generals, commanders, and deputy generals are missing. We suspect that they have left the domains and are gathered in Yudu city. In addition, Ni Huang took the risk to sneak into the domain master's manor and didn't find any traces of the domain master. I suspect that I have entered Yudu under orders. If Alliance Master wants to take down Cold Moon and Green Star domains, Ni Huang estimates that you will be able to do so within 3 days. Nangong Nihuang sent a message to Ji Tianqing. The report was brief but clear and straightforward. Simply put, the two domains that she was ordered to investigate seemed to be heavily guarded, but in fact, the morale of the army was lax and they didn't have much combat power. After all, those left behind were all of the middle and lower ranks. The high-end combat power and strong practitioners were nowhere to be seen. They had probably been transferred to Yuta City. Even the domain masters of the two domains weren't around. One could imagine that the soldiers left behind didn't have much cohesion, let alone morale. If Ji Tianqing wanted to take down those two domains, he could do so in 3 days at most. It would be effortless. Nangong Nihuang's report just happened to confirm Ji Tianqing's guess. No wonder the defense of Yudu city had been strengthened by more than 5 times. Other than the 100,000 city guards, there were also 100,000 elite soldiers and 5,000 Divine Lord realm experts. It turned out that those were all forces transferred from various domains. From the looks of it, it's just as I guessed. Commander Mingyi and Marshal Blood Prison know that I will break through the various domains one by one before finally besieging Yuda city. In order to prevent the various domains from falling one after another, they mobilize the domain masters and elite experts of the various domains to Yuda city. By doing so, they can increase their chances of winning. At the very least, they can defend Yuda city for a few more days. However, those 18 domains have given up in disguise. Ha ha ha. Commander Mingyi and Marshal Blood Prison made this decision for the sake of the overall situation. I wonder what those domain masters think. These thoughts flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind, and he couldn't help but sneer. Then, he sent a message to Nangong Nihuang, telling her to continue hiding in the realm of Cold Moon and be on standby. But what was interesting was that among the 9 great ancient clans, only 3 were completely loyal to the god of the underworld. The moment they received the order, they rushed to Yuda city. As for the other 6 ancient clans, they used all kinds of reasons and excuses to shirk responsibility and refuse to gather in Yuda city. Just 5 days ago, one of the ancient clans could not withstand the repeated persuasion and threats of Commander Nether River and the Blood Prison Marshal. He had no choice but to lead his elite experts and rush to Yuda city. As a result, Commander Mingyi had the support of 4 ancient clans under his command. The other 5 ancient clans were still bitterly holding on, dealing with the repeated threats of the Blood Prison Marshal. No one knew what kind of tricks and schemes the Blood Prison Marshal and Commander Nether River would use to force the ancient clans to surrender. No one knew how long the 5 ancient clans could hold on. But one thing was for sure. The fact that the 5 ancient clans were unwilling to head to Yuda city proved that they were disloyal. To Commander Nether River and the rest, this was disloyalty. But to Ji Tianqing, this was a breakthrough. As a result, after Ji Tianqing received this information, he made a prompt decision to leave Yuda city and pay a visit to the 5 ancient clans. Although he did not need the support of the 5 ancient clans to successfully take over Reincarnation Island, there was a huge problem. There would definitely be a huge battle, and there would definitely be tragic casualties on his side. Therefore, he had to think of a way to subdue the 5 ancient clans for his own use. Only then could he reduce the casualties and take over Reincarnation Island more easily. The key was that after he took over Reincarnation Island, he would need to appoint new domain lords and commanders to firmly control Reincarnation Island. He could not leave Nangong Nihuang, Nangong Ao, and the rest behind to be domain lords of Reincarnation Island. Therefore, the 5 ancient clans were the best candidates. After finding a breakthrough, Ji Tianqing's plan to take over Reincarnation Island was confirmed, and he officially began his operation. 2 days' journey away from Yuda city, there was an ancient pine grotto heaven in Cypress Pine region. It was the territory of the Pine Crane clan. According to Yuchi Po's report, the Blood Prison Marshal's messenger seemed to be in the ancient Pine Grotto heaven. He had been negotiating with the Pine Crane clan for a few days, but there was no conclusion yet. Therefore, Ji Tianqing made the ancient Pine Grotto heaven his first target. Chapter 4204. Ji Tianqing quietly left Yudu and rode the god-slaying battleship to Cypress Pine region. The estimated 2-day journey, with the god-slaying battleship's normal flying speed, arrived at ancient Pine Grotto Heaven on the third night. When he was still tens of thousands of miles away from ancient Pine Grotto Heaven, Ji Tianqing put away the god-slaying battleship and concealed his aura. The entrance to the Grotto Heaven was at the peak of a towering mountain that was 3,000 feet tall. It was surrounded by lofty mountains and steep ridges with ancient pine trees. The peak of the mountain was flattened, and a plaza with a radius of 30 miles was built. It was paved with incomparably hard Qingang divine stone. The array at the entrance was an altar. There were over 100 guards standing guard in the surroundings, and there were 4 God King experts in the lead. It could be seen that the guards had solemn expressions and murderous auras. They were very vigilant and alert. At this moment, Ji Tianqing was faced with 2 choices. He could either show himself openly and state his intentions. Since the Pine Crane clan refused to submit to Commander Mingi, they were most likely waiting for his arrival and wanted to follow him to overthrow the rule of the god of the underworld. Or perhaps, the Pine Crane clan believed that he could kill Commander Mingi and the others and successfully take over Reincarnation Island, so they wanted to follow him to reap the fruits of victory. No matter what the Pine Crane clan was thinking, they should be very welcoming of his arrival. The second choice was to wait for an opportunity and quietly sneak into ancient Pine Grotto Heaven. If he cast spells to break the formation at the entrance of the Grotto Heaven, it would definitely alarm the guards. After some consideration, Ji Tianqing decided to wait patiently for a moment and look for an opportunity. The night was dark, and the cold wind was rustling. Ji Tianqing originally thought that with Reincarnation Island's current tense and alert situation, no one would enter Reincarnation Island at this time. He didn't expect that something unexpected would happen. He waited for about 2 hours, and in the night sky not far away, there was a divine light speeding toward him. When he got closer, he could see that it was a divine ship carved with special patterns and emblems that represented a certain power. Ji Tianqing observed it carefully and frowned. Then he remembered that it seemed to be the emblem of Commander Mingi. In this special period, Commander Mingi must be guarding Yudu, so it was almost impossible for him to come to ancient Pine Grotto Heaven. Therefore, the people in the divine worship were most likely divine generals or messengers under Commander Mingi's command. The result was just as he expected. The divine ship stopped at the entrance of ancient Pine Grotto Heaven. 2 God King powerhouses in shining armor walked out of the divine ship with their heads held high. Behind the 2 God Kings was a group of guards in golden armor. There were 20 of them. This group of people walked to the entrance of ancient Pine Paradise with an arrogant and bossy attitude. A captain among the guards immediately shouted in a dignified tone, "Great Commander Mingi's messenger is here. Pine Crane clan, hurry up and welcome him." The guards guarding the entrance of the Grotto Heaven were already on high alert when they saw the arrival of the divine worship. After seeing the person's attire and hearing what he said, a look of disgust appeared in his eyes. Obviously, the Pine Crane clan hated the messenger of Commander Mingi very much. However, due to many reasons, they could not show their disgust, let alone resist by force. No matter how unwilling the captain of the Pine Crane clan was, he could only lead the guards to bow and salute. "Greetings to Lord Messenger." The 100 guards saluted in a standard manner, but there was no sense of respect. Instead, there was some reluctance. However, the 2 messengers did not take it to heart. They only said with a cold face, "Hurry up and open the passage. I want to see Patriarch Pine Crane and pass on Great Commander Mingi's orders." The 2 captains of the Pine Crane clan had probably received orders from their clan long ago. They were stalling for time as much as possible. As a result, the 2 captains were rambling and trying to change the topic. They were stalling for time with the 2 messengers. They were unwilling to open the formation at the entrance of the Grotto Heaven. The 2 messengers saw through the clues. Their faces became even colder, and their attitudes became even more forceful and fierce. They repeatedly threatened and coerced the other party to open the entrance. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing could not help but frown. He thought to himself, there's already a group of Commander Mingi's messengers that entered ancient Pine Paradise a few days ago to negotiate with the patriarchs of the Pine Crane clan. Several days have passed, and there's still no result. The second group of messengers has rushed over. I don't know what they're here for, but they've been blocked outside by the Pine Crane clan. Could it be that the negotiations between the first group of messengers and the Pine Crane clan have collapsed? The second group of messengers must have brought the fury of Commander Mingi to threaten the Pine Crane clan. Thinking like this, it meant that the Pine Crane clan had not compromised. Ji Tianqing felt more confident. The two captains of the Pine Crane clan had been in a deadlock with the messengers for a long time. In the end, they had angered the two messengers. They had almost drawn their swords and killed them. The Pine Crane clan was certainly unwilling to shed all pretenses of cordiality and start a war with Commander Mingi during this special period. As a result, the two captains of the guards could only restrain their fury and were forced to open the entrance of the Grotto Heaven. The two messengers assumed a victorious posture. They led their subordinates and swaggered through the spatial gate, entering ancient Pine Paradise. The Pine Crane clan's guards were so angry that their eyes were about to spit fire. They gnashed their teeth and glared at the messengers, but there was nothing they could do. It was not until the messengers had entered ancient Pine Paradise and the guards had closed the grand array of the Grotto Heaven's entrance that they began to discuss and curse with righteous indignation. Commander Mingi's lackeys have really gone too far. These guys are so snobbish and arrogant. They're really hateful. It's said that the Kenshin is about to reach Reincarnation Island. These guys won't live for long. Shut up. How can you say such things? Humph. Anyway, it's something that everyone knows. There are no outsiders here. What's wrong with saying it? The first group of messengers is still here. The second group of messengers is rushing over. I'm afraid that Commander Mingi is going to do something bad again. I'm really worried that the patriarch and elders won't be able to withstand the pressure and will yield to Commander Mingi. Don't worry. This is a major event that concerns the life and future of our Pine Crane clan. How can the patriarch make a mistake? The example of the boundless heaven continent is right in front of us. Unless the true body of the god of the underworld returns, who can stop the Kenshin's attack? Commander Mingi and the Blood Prison Marshal have no choice but to fight to the death. But our Pine Crane clan can't make a mistake. Obviously, the ordinary disciples and guards of the Pine Crane clan all knew how to choose. Their stance was very firm. From this, it could be seen what kind of mentality the Pine Crane clan had. On the other side, the two messengers led the team and flew across the sky at lightning speed. They rushed toward the depths of ancient Pine Paradise. Along the way, the two messengers were also discussing with gloomy expressions. They cursed the guards guarding the Grotto Heaven's entrance. They really didn't know what was good for them and deserved to die. The 20 accompanying guards nodded repeatedly and did not forget to take the opportunity to flatter them. However, they had never imagined that the expert that caused them to be extremely anxious and terrified was silently following behind them. Chapter 4205. To the Pine Crane clan, the second batch of messengers was an uninvited guest that was annoying. However, to Ji Tianqing, it was an opportunity and a breakthrough. If the second batch of messengers had not arrived in time, it would have been difficult for him to sneak into ancient Pine Grotto Heaven without alerting anyone. He followed the second batch of messengers and flew across the night sky, heading straight for the depths of ancient Pine Grotto Heaven. Along the way, he could see the beautiful scenery of ancient Pine Grotto Heaven. However, it was late at night and it was quiet all around. There were no disciples of the Pine Crane clan. Presumably, under such a tense atmosphere, the disciples of the Pine Crane clan were not in the mood to come out and play. At the same time, in the depths of ancient Pine Grotto heaven, there was a group of palaces that were lit up in the middle of the night. More than 100 magnificent palaces stood on top of more than 40 mountain peaks. They were arranged in picturesque disorder, forming a natural heaven and earth formation. This was the residence of the Pine Crane clan. The most majestic palace in the middle was the Pine Crane Palace. At this moment, the door of the main hall of the Pine Crane Palace was wide open. The main hall was brightly lit and dazzling. In the magnificent main hall, the Pine Crane clan leader sat on the gilded throne at the head of the hall. He was leaning on the wide back of the chair and holding his chin with one hand. He was in a daze. The clan leader was already over 26,000 years old. His strength had reached the later stage of the 9th-level Divine King realm. He was only one step away from the peak Divine King realm. It was a pity that he had been stuck in this realm for over 8,000 years. Without exceptional talent, aptitude, comprehension, and amazing opportunities and treasures, it would be difficult for him to become a peak Divine King in his life. This thin and skinny old man always liked to wear simple green clothes and black cloth shoes. He also wore a simple and old bamboo hat that had gone through the vicissitudes of life. He had a head full of gray and white sparse hair, but it was combed meticulously every day. His face was thin and his eyes were sunken. However, his eyes were clear and sharp. He always had a goatee. Judging from his appearance, the Pine Crane clan leader was not a flexible person. He was a stubborn and even paranoid old man. And that was indeed the case. In the main hall that was brightly lit, there were 2 high-level divine kings sitting on the 2 sides of the main hall. They were both wearing brocade clothes and luxurious divine crowns. With one look, one could tell that they were powerful and influential practitioners from Yudu. These 2 were the first batch of messengers sent by Commander Styx. They had arrived at ancient Pine Grotto 5 days ago. Over the past 5 days, the 2 messengers had to negotiate with Patriarch Pine Crane and the elders of the Pine Crane clan in the main hall for a very long time. The 2 messengers tried every possible way to persuade Patriarch Songhe, using both the carrot and the stick. However, they were still unable to change Patriarch Songhe's mind, nor could they change Patriarch Songhe's decision. The 2 of them had racked their brains and exhausted their mouths, but to no avail. Until today, both sides had lost their patience and were on the verge of fighting each other on the spot. But even then, Patriarch Songhe still acted like a dead pig that wasn't afraid of boiling water. He simply slumped on the throne and pretended to be in deep thought and rest with his eyes closed. The 2 messengers were completely helpless. They could only drink their tea with a black face. Behind the 2 of them, the 20 guards that accompanied them stood carefully. They didn't dare to make a single sound. The elders of the Pine Crane clan sat on the 2 large chairs on the left and right sides. Although they were accompanying the 2 messengers, the 2 sides had already reached an agreement. However, the negotiations between the 2 sides had already broken down. They sat there calmly, either closing their eyes to rest or quietly drinking tea. No one spoke a word. And the turning point of the situation was that the second batch of messengers sent by Commander Styx was about to arrive. As early as a few hours ago, the 2 messengers from the first batch received news that the second batch of messengers was about to arrive to deliver Commander Styx's latest orders. Although this made them feel like they were not trusted and were about to be abandoned, this was Commander Styx's decision. But this was Commander Styx's decision. They could only silently accept it. They had no right to object. After thinking it through, the 2 messengers felt a sense of relief. Since Commander Styx had sent the second batch of messengers to deal with Patriarch Songhe, there was nothing for them to do. Therefore, both sides remained silent and quietly waited for the second batch of messengers to arrive. Time passed silently. Half an hour went by quickly. At this moment, a hazy divine light in the distant night sky was rapidly approaching. In just a few breaths, the divine light enveloped more than 20 figures and landed on the square outside the main hall. After the divine light dispersed, the 2 messengers and 20 golden armored guards were revealed. Seeing this, the 2 messengers and 20 guards in the main hall stood up and walked out of the main hall to welcome the arrival of their colleagues. Even if the 2 sides had the same power, status, and rank, in ancient Pine Grotto heaven, colleagues had to give face and show off. Because this represented Commander Styx's prestige. Since the 2 messengers walked out of the main hall with the guards, Patriarch Song He and the elders could no longer close their eyes and rest. They didn't want to submit to Commander Styx, but they couldn't openly rebel and challenge Commander Styx's prestige and bottom line. Otherwise, before Sword God could attack Reincarnation Island, the enraged Commander Nether River would make an example out of the Pine Crane tribe. One had to know that other than the Pine Crane clan, there were 4 other ancient clans that were also weighing the pros and cons. If the Pine Crane clan became the target of Commander Styx's prestige, it would be too unfair. Not long after, Patriarch Song He led a few elders to the square unhurriedly. At this moment, the 2 batches of messengers had already greeted each other. Patriarch Song He and a few other elders also stepped forward unwillingly to pay their respects to the second batch of messengers. In fact, both sides' attitudes were obvious. Even if the second batch of messengers came to persuade him, Patriarch Song He wouldn't compromise. However, both sides hadn't fallen out with each other yet, so the Pine Crane clan still had to put on a show. Unexpectedly, the 2 new messengers didn't even bother to put on a show. After Patriarch Song He and the others bowed, the 2 arrogant messengers started to make things difficult in public with gloomy faces. How dare you, Song He Tao? You've repeatedly disobeyed Commander Styx's orders and disobeyed His Majesty the God Emperor's decree. Your crimes are unforgivable and should be punished. The burly messenger on the left had a gloomy expression. His tone was fierce, and he released a powerful aura. The messenger on the right also took out a noble golden silk. After unfolding it, he read aloud, "Those who see Commander Styx's orders are like seeing Commander Styx himself. Why aren't you kneeling and saluting?" Obviously, this golden silk was an order written by Commander Styx himself. It represented Commander Styx's personal arrival. The messengers present hurriedly knelt and saluted. Patriarch Song He frowned with an ugly expression. The other elders looked at each other and had a bad premonition in their hearts. Chapter 4206. The second batch of messengers clearly came with ill intentions. This thought flashed through the minds of Chief Song He and the other elders at the same time. In fact, this was also within their expectations. In the previous 5 days, the Pine Crane clan was stubborn and didn't surrender no matter how the first batch of messengers threatened them. Those 2 messengers must have reported the corresponding situation to Commander Mingi. Because of this, Commander Mingi sent out the second batch of messengers to denounce them. As expected, the messenger holding the golden silk saw that Chief Song He and the rest were still hesitating and didn't kneel. He shouted angrily again, "Song He Tao, you didn't kneel when you saw Commander's decree. Is the Pine Crane clan rebelling?" With such a heavy accusation, Chief Song He didn't dare to accept it no matter what. He hurriedly led the way and knelt down. The other elders could only endure the humiliation and kneel behind Chief Song He. When the messenger saw them bowing their heads and listening to the decree, the corner of his mouth curled up into a sneer. Only then did he hold up the golden silk and read aloud, "The Pine Crane clan, an ancient clan with a foundation of 40,000 years and a long history. Since we're based on Reincarnation Island, we should take it as our responsibility to defend against the invasion of foreign enemies. Only then can we live up to the nurturing of Reincarnation Island. Now that Reincarnation Island is about to be invaded by foreign enemies, the reaction and decision of the Pine Crane clan has greatly disappointed me and pained me. Far away, the Pine Crane clan has failed the nurturing of Reincarnation Island, the protection and respect of billions of people. Recently, the Pine Crane clan has failed to live up to His Majesty the God Emperor's trust and high regard. They are truly disloyal and shameless. Therefore, I represent the 800 billion people of Reincarnation Island to condemn the Pine Crane clan. I represent His Majesty the God Emperor in Yuta City to punish the Pine Crane clan as a warning to others. From now on, all the properties and territories of the Pine Crane clan will be confiscated. Only ancient Pine Grotto Heaven will be left as mercy. Of the 9,607 people of the Pine Crane clan, other than the 300 guards left behind to guard ancient Pine Grotto Heaven, the rest will be escorted to Yudu for trial. This punishment will be carried out by the 4 great reincarnation divine generals leading 8,000 elite soldiers. We hope the Pine Crane clan will recognize the situation, correct their mistakes, and cooperate actively. Anyone who resists or escapes will be killed without mercy. The content in the golden silk was rather long, but the key points were also very prominent. When the messenger finished reading Commander Styx's order, the air seemed to be filled with a thick murderous aura. The messenger slowly rolled up the golden silk and handed it to Patriarch Song He. He sneered and said, "Song Hetao, you'd better take a look at the Commander-in-Chief's handwritten decree with your own eyes." Ha ha ha. Who told you to refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit? This is the result of angering the Grand Commander. In a few hours, the 4 godly generals and the 8,000-strong army would arrive. Let your clansmen pack their bags and get ready to set off. The messenger purposely dragged out the word, "Be on your way," and his tone was full of ridicule. The few elders of the Pine Crane race shuddered, their eyes filled with fear and anger. Although they had guessed that Commander Nether River might very well use the Pine Crane race to establish his authority in his fury, they still didn't believe him. But they hadn't expected Commander Mingi to be so decisive and give the order so quickly. Furthermore, the punishment was so ruthless. Not only was the Pine Crane race going to be stripped of all their properties and territories, but they were also going to be escorted to Yudu. What did this mean? The entire Pine Crane race would be imprisoned in Yudu. If they didn't surrender and pledge their loyalty to Commander Mingi, they would either become prisoners or be killed as an example to others. Commander Mingi still pretended to leave ancient Pine Grotto Heaven to the Pine Crane race and allowed them to station 300 guards there. But everyone knew that this was completely useless. If the Pine Crane race's clansmen were all executed, ancient Pine Grotto Heaven would naturally become ownerless and would be taken back by Commander Mingi. If the Pine Crane race submitted to Commander Mingi, they would also be sent to the battlefield as cannon fodder when fighting against the Kenshin in the future. It was estimated that more than 80% of the Pine Crane race's clansmen who were forced to participate in the war would die. In short, no matter if the Pine Crane race surrendered or not, they wouldn't have a good ending. The air in the plaza seemed to have frozen, and there was dead silence. Patriarch Song He held the golden silk with both hands, but he didn't open it. His expression was very ugly, and the joints in his hands were bulging. It was obvious that his heart was overflowing with anger. But he lowered his head and didn't make a sound, nor did he get angry. At this moment, there were 2 choices in front of him. He could either accept Commander Mingi's edict and inform his clansmen to prepare. After a few hours, he would be obediently escorted to Yudu to be judged. Or he could resist Commander Mingi's edict and kill the messengers in the plaza. If he chose the former, the Pine Crane race would be finished, and their fate would be controlled by Commander Mingi. Even if Commander Mingi in Martial Blood Prison were lucky enough to block the invasion of the Kenshin in the future, the Pine Crane race would probably be wiped out. Thinking about this, Patriarch Song He eliminated the first option. As for the second, if the Pine Crane race wanted to resist the edict and kill the messengers, they would immediately be attacked by the 4 reincarnation divine generals and the 8,000-strong army. In just a few hours, it would be difficult for the Pine Crane race to strengthen their defenses and make any changes. The only way was to close the entrance of the Grotto Heaven and defend it to the death, fighting against Commander Mingi to the end. But in this way, even if they paid a heavy price, they could still block the 4 reincarnation divine generals and the 8,000-strong army. Then, Commander Mingi would send out more troops to attack ancient Pine Grotto Heaven and kill the Pine Crane race disciples. No one could save the Pine Crane race. Unless a miracle happened. Kenshin miraculously descended from the sky at a critical moment to save them. This thought flashed through Patriarch Song He's mind. Even he felt that it was absurd. Where was Kenshin now? It was uncertain when he would come to Reincarnation Island. Moreover, the Pine Crane race had no relationship with Kenshin, so there was no way to contact them. How would Kenshin know about the Pine Crane race's situation? Why would he risk his life to save the Pine Crane race? Patriarch Song He felt a little hopeless at this thought. This choice seemed to be a dead end. No matter how he looked at it, the Pine Crane race was forced into a dead end. At this moment, the Pine Crane race elders were also at a loss. They looked at their patriarch and waited for him to make a decision. If their patriarch decided to surrender, they could only endure the humiliation. If their patriarch decided to resist, they would not hesitate to kill him. The messengers also sensed that the atmosphere was a little strange. They seemed to have guessed Patriarch Song He's thoughts. The 40 golden armored guards drew their swords and sabers. They were on high alert. The 4 messengers stared at Patriarch Song He sharply. They even warned and threatened him. Song Hetao, don't keep making mistakes and bring harm to the entire Pine Crane race. The 4 reincarnation divine generals and the 8,000-strong army will be here soon. Don't take any chances. Chapter 4207. In fact, the messengers were also a little panicked. While they were talking, the 4 reincarnation divine generals and the army of 8,000 would soon arrive. In fact, the army would take at least 12 hours to arrive. If Patriarch Song He really decided to resist, he would have enough time to kill them dozens of times. Before this, the messenger group had been arrogant and domineering. That was because they represented Commander Mingi. They were confident that the Song He tribe would not dare to offend them because of their noble status. But it was different now. Commander Mingi's edict was too ruthless. He wanted to exterminate the Song He tribe. If it were anyone else, they would have been enraged and retaliated. Judging from Patriarch Song He's expression and reaction, he most likely wanted to resist. If Patriarch Song He took action, the messenger group would be the first to be killed. At this thought, the 4 messengers were even more panicked. They regretted being so arrogant before. But now that things had developed to this point, they could not change their attitude and suddenly admit defeat. They could only pray that Song He Tao would calm down and not act on impulse or go crazy. Otherwise, their glorious and awe-inspiring messenger group would become cannon fodder. Under everyone's gaze, Patriarch Song He slowly raised his head and straightened his thin body. Under the withered and yellow bamboo hat, his wrinkled and weathered face was full of unyielding and anger. He narrowed his eyes, which flickered with a frightening cold light. He stared at the messengers and spoke in a low voice. Every person in every race has the right to survive at all costs. Our Song He tribe has survived for tens of thousands of years and has survived to this day not by sucking up to those in power. Commander Mingi has no right to judge our tribe on behalf of the billions of people on Reincarnation Island. He can only represent the god of the underworld and oppress us ancient clans with his domineering power. As he spoke, Patriarch Song He stood up and straightened his back. The elders of the Song He tribe also stood up and stared at the messengers angrily. They had already guessed what their patriarch was going to say. While they were worried, they also felt hot-blooded and proud. After all, they were descendants of ancient clans. Nobility and pride flowed in their bones. They were willing to give up their lives for their pride and dignity. This was very difficult for ordinary people to do. But to the disciples of the ancient clans, in the face of life and death, they could carry it out. The atmosphere in the square changed. It was no longer deathly still. Instead, it was filled with biting cold winds and murderous intent. The messengers began to panic. They were intimidated by Patriarch Song He's aura, and they couldn't help but retreat. Song Hetao, what do you want? Song Hetao, have you gone senile? If you dare to go against the Grand Commander's orders, you'll be killing everyone in the Pine Crane tribe. Elders, what are you still standing there for? Hurry up and persuade your patriarch, he wants to kill all of you. Song Hetao. This is Reincarnation Island, His Majesty the God Emperor's territory. We are all His Majesty the God Emperor's people. It is the duty of you and the Pine Crane race to obey His Majesty the God Emperor's decree. Don't make a mistake. However, not only did the elders of the Pine Crane clan not dissuade their patriarch, they even secretly ordered the guards near the Divine Palace to gather. Since they had decided to fight back, they had to surround the group of messengers. No one could be left alive. Patriarch Song He also turned a deaf ear to the messenger's words. He looked up at the night sky with a solemn expression and sighed in a sorrowful and heavy tone, in the Great Tribulation era, my Pine Crane race doesn't want to have a meteoric rise. We only want to avoid disaster and protect ourselves, but we can't do that. Commander Mingi has gone too far. My race has endured for 1,000 years, but in the end, he doesn't even give us a way out. There's no way out, so I can only fight with all my might. Ancestors of the Pine Crane race, please forgive this unfilial descendant. At this moment of life and death, I have no choice but to go crazy for once. Anyway, no matter what I choose, I'll die. Since that's the case, I'd rather die with dignity than disgrace the face and integrity of my ancestors. Patriarch Song He's voice wasn't loud, but it had a kind of soul-stirring power that reverberated in the square. If it were someone else who said this, it would be somewhat hypocritical. However, when it came from his mouth, it didn't feel hypocritical. It even felt a bit tragic and hot-blooded. At this moment, the elders were also affected by his momentum and threw away the consequences and worries. Their blood was boiling, and their fighting spirit was burning. There was only one thought in their minds. Even if they would die in the end, they had to fight to their heart's content before they died. Song Hetao, you're crazy. You're really crazy. The messenger who held the golden silk and read the decree suddenly panicked and shouted anxiously. The other 3 messengers saw that the situation was not right, so they hurriedly took him and the guards and flew away. Even if it was a bit embarrassing, and it would weaken Commander Mingi's prestige, they couldn't care less. They had to escape from ancient Pine Grotto Heaven and save their lives first. After a few hours, when Divine General Samsara and the army arrived, they would naturally take revenge for them. The 4 messengers secretly swore that when the time came, they would definitely torture Patriarch Song He and the elders ruthlessly to dispel the hatred in their hearts. However, they could only think about it. Take them down, don't leave a single one alive. Patriarch Song He suddenly raised his hand and gave the order. His tone was exceptionally decisive and domineering. The 6 elders who had been ready for a long time took out their divine weapons without hesitation and rushed toward the 4 messengers with murderous intent. At the same time, more than 300 divine lord guards rushed out of the night sky around the square and formed a circle in an instant, intercepting the group of messengers. What followed was a bloody battle where the number of people was not equal. 6 Divine King Realm Elders led more than 300 Divine Monarch Realm Guards to besiege the 4 messengers and 40 guards. From the very beginning, this battle was a one-sided suppression. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. One side wanted to silence the messengers as soon as possible, while the other side wanted to break out of the encirclement. Both sides unleashed their ultimate skills with all their might, releasing thousands of dazzling divine lights that interweaved in the night sky to form a dazzling scene. All kinds of divine skills and secret skills collided, creating a loud rumbling sound that reverberated between heaven and earth. The square with a radius of 10,000 feet was completely covered by the 5-colored divine lights. Patriarch Song He stood in the night sky and stared at the battlefield expressionlessly. He did not attack. He only silently opened the defensive array of the square to prevent the shockwaves of the battle from spreading out and destroying the surrounding palaces. In just 15 minutes, the battle was about to end. The messengers were slaughtered. Only 2 messengers of the 7th Divine King realm were still alive, but they were also severely injured. Before they died, one of the messengers used all his strength to find an opportunity to send out a message jade slip. He wanted to spread the news of the Song He tribe's rebellion. Whoosh! The jade slip flew into the night sky and was about to disappear. The expressions of Patriarch Song He and the other elders changed, and they all looked anxious. In comparison, it was Kenshin's sudden appearance in ancient pine paradise that made them even more surprised and shocked. As for the 2 messengers who were on the verge of death, their expressions changed drastically and their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. They could not believe that the sword god, who caused people to tremble in fear upon hearing his name, had actually appeared out of thin air and intercepted the communication jade slip they sent out. This was simply too absurd. Wasn't Kenshin still in the boundless heaven continent? When did he come to the reincarnation island? Moreover, there was no news of Kenshin entering reincarnation island. He had appeared in ancient pine grotto out of thin air. This was too strange, wasn't it? This won't do. Even if we die here, we must report this news to the Grand Commander. Kenshin has already begun to move, but the Grand Commander and the Grand Marshal don't know anything. This is too scary. These thoughts flashed through the minds of the 2 messengers. They took out their communication jade slips in tacit agreement and sent out the news as quickly as possible. If they could spread this extremely important news, even if they died, the Grand Commander would give them posthumous rewards and treat their families well. Unfortunately, Patriarch Song He and the other elders had already suffered once. How could it happen a second time? The 2 messengers had just taken out their communication jade slips. Before they could input any information, they were beaten up by Patriarch Song He and the other elders until blood spurted out of their 7 orifices and they were sent flying. The communication jade slips in their hands were also shattered and scattered on the ground. The 2 messengers were beaten until they were dizzy and almost fainted. The elders swarmed forward and unleashed their ultimate techniques to kill the 2 messengers. After a series of muffled bangs, blood splattered in the explosion of divine light. The 2 messengers were killed on the spot. Not even their bones were left. The battle was over, and the square finally regained its peace. The Song He tribe did not have time to clean up the battlefield. Under the leadership of Patriarch Song He, they bowed in unison and greeted Ji Tianqing. We pay our respects to Lord Kenshin. Not only Patriarch Song He and the other elders, but hundreds of guards also bowed in unison. It was obvious that everyone's voice was trembling. Clearly, they were very excited. Even now, many people still felt like they were in a dream. They could not believe that the white-robed young man in front of them was really Kenshin. Ji Tianqing landed on the square. Looking at the respectful and emotional crowd, he nodded slightly and said, "Everyone, please rise." Only then did everyone straighten their backs and look at him with burning eyes. They had thousands of words to say and questions in their hearts. Chapter 4209. Upon hearing Ji Tianqing's words, Patriarch Pine Crane and the other elders were shocked and secretly rejoiced. Only then did they realize that Ji Tianqing had already infiltrated ancient Pine Grotto heaven. However, he had been hiding in the dark, observing the negotiations between the Pine Crane clan and the second batch of messengers. It was only when the Pine Crane clan rebelled and wanted to kill all the messengers that he appeared at the crucial moment. It was because the Pine Crane clan refused to submit to Commander Styx that they could see Kenshin's true appearance and sit here and talk amiably. If Patriarch Pine Crane had compromised and surrendered to Commander Styx, then it would have been a different ending. Fortunately, the heavens had eyes. The Pine Crane clan's persistence and uncompromising finally won Kenshin's trust and favor. At this moment, not only was Patriarch Pine Crane excited, but the other elders were also quite excited, as if they saw a golden and bright future. Of course, these were all thoughts in their hearts and could not be said out loud. Patriarch Pine Crane still had to put on a show. He hurriedly said to Ji Tianqing, "Lord Kenshin, before you appeared, we did not know of your existence. What I said at that time was sincere from the bottom of my heart. Although our Pine Crane clan isn't one of the top forces, we still have backbone and bravery. Moreover, we have never compromised with Commander Styx in the past 1,000 years. A few months ago, when we learned that you had raised an army in the boundless heaven continent and successfully overthrew the rule of the Azura God Emperor, we were very excited and looked forward to it. We hoped day and night that you could come to Reincarnation Island sooner and overthrow the dark rule of the God of the Underworld, and return freedom to the people. Therefore, we refused Commander Styx's many summons and threats, and we were waiting for your arrival." The other elders hurriedly nodded in agreement and echoed, "That's right. Lord Kenshin, we struggled under the dark rule of the God of the Underworld and the oppression of Commander Styx for 1,000 years, but we never saw the light of hope. It wasn't until the news of your return to the God realm spread that we saw the light. If there is anyone in the world who can overthrow the rule of the 5 God Emperors and restore peace to the world, freedom, and peace to the people, it is you." The few elders flattered and praised Ji Tianqing, clearly expressing that the Pine Crane clan could not wait to submit to him. This was because the ancient clans and Rebel Alliance forces on the boundless heaven continent were the best examples. The Nangong clan, who were the first to express their support for the Kenshin, became the biggest beneficiary. Of course, the Sword God and the Nangong clan were old friends. However, the members of the Pine Crane clan believed that as long as they were the first to side with the Kenshin and publicly expressed their support for the Kenshin occupying the Reincarnation Island, they would definitely be trusted and valued by the Kenshin. If the Pine Crane clan showed enough sincerity and loyalty in the future war, the Pine Crane clan would be able to take over the Pine Crane clan. In that case, after the Kenshin occupied the Reincarnation Island, it was very likely that he would trust the Nangong clan and hand the Reincarnation Island over to the Pine Crane clan to manage. Seeing that the atmosphere was sufficiently enthusiastic and that the foundation was basically in place, clan leader Pine Crane took the opportunity to make a request. "Lord Kenshin, you should also know that the people of the Reincarnation Island are also waiting day and night for you to come and save them as soon as possible. Whether it is to save the people who are suffering or to help you complete your great task of occupying the Reincarnation Island. The Pine Crane clan is duty-bound and is willing to charge and break through the enemy lines and cheer for you." After saying that, clan leader Pine Crane led a few elders and bowed deeply to Ji Tianqing. Their attitude was extremely sincere. Back when Ji Tianqing was rebelling in the boundless heaven continent, he had to think of all sorts of ways to coerce the ancient clans to submit to him and form the Rebel Alliance. Just forming the Rebel Alliance and gathering the first batch of 10 forces had taken him a lot of time and effort. Now, the ancient clans of the Reincarnation Island had seen the signs from the example of the boundless heaven continent. All of them were waiting for him to come sooner so that they could pledge their allegiance to him as soon as they saw him. While this made him feel a little amused, it also made him feel quite relaxed and happy. At least, he did not have to waste his breath and time to persuade and subdue those ancient clans one by one. So far, there were 4 ancient clans on the Reincarnation Island that had submitted to Commander Mingi. Including the Pine Crane clan, there were still 5 ancient clans that were in a wait-and-see state. Ji Tianqing believed that the 4 ancient clans were most likely in the same state of mind as the Pine Crane clan. They were all waiting for his arrival and appearance. Tonight, as long as he accepted the Pine Crane clan's submission and spread the news, the other ancient clans would be delighted. When the other 4 ancient clans saw hope, they would definitely be in high spirits and try to contact him. Clan leader Pine Crane, I am very gratified that your Pine Crane clan has such intentions. At the same time, I am also happy for the hundreds of millions of people on the Reincarnation Island. Combined with Kenshin's series of schemes in the boundless heaven continent, his elusive tracks, and the various miracles he had created, he was certain that Kenshin was extremely shrewd and extremely resourceful. In front of such a powerful and scheming expert, it was better not to play any tricks. He might not be able to deceive Kenshin and obtain any benefits. He might even lose his life in the process. Thinking of this, Patriarch Song he obediently recited the oath of surrender, not daring to think about anything else. The content of the oath that followed made his expression change slightly, and he felt a lot of pressure. The oaths of the heavenly Tao were more and more detailed and demanding than the previous one. Patriarch Song he's forehead was gradually covered in sweat, and his face became more and more solemn. The elders listened quietly, but they were more and more shocked, worried, and fearful. Previously, they were still curious about the oath that Kenshin had made. Now, they were no longer curious, and they finally understood why the rumors said that oaths of the heavenly Tao were terrifying. At this moment, they only had one feeling. That was. After Patriarch Song he recited this oath, he would be absolutely loyal to Kenshin, and would not do anything that would harm Kenshin's interests or harm Kenshin. Whether it was direct betrayal, disobedience, or resistance, or indirect passivity, neglect, or disobedience, they would all be supervised and punished by the heavenly Tao. Patriarch Song he and the elders suddenly understood. No wonder Kenshin trusted the 20 factions of the Rebel Alliance so much, as well as the nearly 100 territorial lords of the boundless heaven continent. He had completely handed over the control of the boundless heaven continent to the Nangong clan without any misgivings. So that was it. They had learned something new. Even if he wasn't in the boundless heaven continent, even if he went anywhere, he wouldn't have to worry about the boundless heaven continent. After all, the heavens were always helping him monitor those who had made the heavenly Tao oath. Who would dare to betray them? Just like that, Patriarch Song he finished reciting the 1,000-word oath in a heavy, sorrowful, and helpless mood. His entire body lit up with dazzling divine light, and a wisp of Taoist rhyme circled above his head. Not only were there dazzling flashes of lightning in the sky, but there was also the sound of thunder rumbling. Clearly, the heavenly Tao oath had been established, and he was recognized and supervised by the heavens. From this moment onward, Patriarch Song he was one of Kenshin's most loyal subjects. After a while, all kinds of strange phenomena gradually disappeared. Patriarch Song he's forehead was covered in cold sweat, and his face was pale. He lowered his head and didn't say anything, silently holding the jade slip and returning it to Ji Tianqing. Chapter 42:11. The Pine Crane clan surrendered to Ji Tianqing in this way. This also meant that Ji Tianqing had taken the first step to develop his forces on the Reincarnation Island and establish the Rebel Alliance's Reincarnation Island branch. He sat on the throne at the head of the hall and waved his hand to signal Patriarch Pine Crane and the elders to return to their seats instead of standing in the hall. Next, let's discuss how to deal with the Reincarnation Divine General and the 8,000 troops. Also, what arrangements will Commander Mingi make after we defeat the 8,000-strong army? Ji Tianqing's words showed that he was not afraid of the 4 Reincarnation Divine Generals and the 8,000 troops at all. He also had absolute confidence in defeating them. What they needed to discuss was how to deploy the troops so that they could defeat the 8,000 troops more easily and minimize the casualties. They also needed to deduce the next move and plan of Commander Mingi after the 8,000 troops were defeated. Only by predicting the enemy's moves and predicting the enemy's plans and actions in advance could they take the initiative and have the advantage. Patriarch Pine Crane and the elders all understood these simple truths. Therefore, they were very cooperative and took the initiative to tell Ji Tianqing the situation of the Pine Crane clan's defense and the details of the troops. Although Nangong Nihuang, Nangong Ao, and the others used the magic skills he taught them to inquire about various aspects of the reincarnation island. He also had a general understanding of the basic situation of the Pine Crane clan. However, Patriarch Pine Crane's report was more detailed, which also allowed him to make judgments and decisions more intuitively. After Patriarch Pine Crane finished his report, the elders added more information. After listening to their reports, Ji Tianqing made adjustments and instructions. There are more than 8,000 disciples in the Pine Crane clan, but only about 4,000 people can join the battle. Before, you had to resist Commander Mingi's order, but you couldn't fall out with him. You could only take a conservative defensive posture. Almost all the troops are arranged in the ancient pine cave, mainly to protect the defensive formation at the entrance. Ji Tianqing analyzed calmly. Patriarch Pine Crane and the elders all nodded to show their agreement and waited for him to continue. Ji Tianqing continued, however, the 4 Samsara divine generals and the 8,000 soldiers don't know that the Pine Crane tribe has fought back and killed the messengers. Therefore, they should have rushed over at a normal speed and entered ancient Pine Grotto Heaven to escort the disciples of Pine Crane clan to Yudu. In other words, the most they could expect was that the Pine Crane clan would likely resist and counterattack when they deployed a large number of troops in the ancient Pine Grotto Heaven. But they would never have imagined that the Pine Crane clan would have the courage and determination to set up an ambush outside ancient Pine Paradise. Upon hearing this, Patriarch Song He and the other elders immediately understood what he meant, and their expressions changed. Lord Kenshin, do you mean, to transfer our clan's disciples out of the cave abode and set up an ambush in the wilderness to besiege the 8,000-strong army? Lord Kenshin, I'm afraid. I'm afraid this isn't appropriate. Yes. We only have 4,000 disciples who can participate in the battle. How can we besiege an army of 8,000? What's more, we'll stay in the Grotto Heaven and have the protection of the great defensive formation. We can get twice the result with half the effort. Lord Kenshin, I have a suggestion. We can put the 8,000-strong army into the Grotto Heaven and then try to besiege them. Wouldn't that be safer? Patriarch Song He and the other elders had the same reaction. Upon hearing that Ji Tianqing wanted to send their clan's disciples to set up an ambush outside the Grotto Heaven, they were instantly filled with worry. Without the protection of the great defensive formation of ancient Pine Grotto Heaven, they had no sense of security. Only when they fought in the Grotto Heaven would they have the confidence and certainty. Of course, this was under the premise that Ji Tianqing was there to oversee the situation. However, Ji Tianqing was indifferent to the suggestion of Patriarch Song He and the other elders. With an indifferent expression, he said, how could Commander Mingi and the Samsara divine generals not have guessed this? How could they not be on guard? Also, are you sure you want to fight in ancient Pine Grotto Heaven? You must know that swords have no eyes. If more than 10,000 soldiers fight, the aftermath of the battle will definitely turn ancient Pine Grotto Heaven into a mess. Many innocent people will also suffer. Upon hearing this, Patriarch Song He and the other elders hesitated. What Lord Kenshin said makes sense. Ji Tianqing continued, moreover, the disciples of the Pine Crane clan have to set up an ambush outside the Grotto Heaven with the help of the Great Formation. Only then can we unleash the greatest power. You don't have much time left. In a few hours, the 8,000-strong army will arrive. The longer you delay, the more danger the Pine Crane clan will face. Patriarch Song He and the other elders' eyes lit up when they heard Ji Tianqing say to set up the Great Formation. They saw hope again. Patriarch Song He looked at Ji Tianqing with sparkling eyes and asked expectantly, Lord Kenshin, we only have a few hours to prepare. Can you set up the Great Formation in such a short time? Patriarch Song He and the other elders did not dare to believe it. However, they all knew that Kenshin was best at creating miracles, so they still had some expectations in their hearts. Unexpectedly, Ji Tianqing answered without hesitation, 6 hours is enough. Patriarch Song He and the other elders were shocked, and a strong sense of hope ignited in their hearts. They immediately dispelled their worries. In their opinion, if Kenshin personally set up the Great Formation, how could it be of a low grade? It was at least a high-grade king-grade defensive Great Formation. One had to know that ancient Pine Grotto Heaven's Great Formation was only a high-grade king-grade defensive Great Formation. To be able to set up such a great formation in 6 hours, Kenshin really created miracles time and time again. It was amazing. Patriarch Song He no longer had any worries and nodded decisively, "We will follow Lord Kenshin's orders." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said in a dignified tone, "Then what are we waiting for? Gather the disciples of the Pine Crane clan immediately." Patriarch Song He acknowledged the order and hurriedly left with the other elders to pass down the order. In a short while, thousands of Pine Crane disciples received the order. In order to not leak the news in advance, no one leaked the news that Kenshin was here. As a result, many Pine Crane disciples were very confused and worried when they learned that they were to gather outside the Grotto Heaven to set up an ambush. In their opinion, were the Patriarch and elders crazy? Was it not safer to stay inside the Grotto Heaven? Why did they have to set up an ambush outside the Grotto Heaven? However, no matter how confused they were, they did not dare to disobey the Patriarch's orders and could only do as they were told. In a short 7 minutes, the 4,000 Pine Crane disciples had gathered in the square. Patriarch Song He and the other elders then led the 4,000 disciples and left ancient Pine Grotto Heaven in a grandiose manner. Ji Tianqing maintained his invisible state and hid his aura, quietly following behind the group. Soon, the 4,000 disciples of the Pine Crane clan stopped 20,000 miles away from ancient Pine Grotto Heaven. There were towering mountains and steep ridges all around, covered with lush primitive forests that revealed hazy outlines under the night sky. The finishing work was done by him, Patriarch Song He, a few elders, and a dozen deacons. After another quarter of an hour, the array was finally completed. This formation, which had a radius of 10,000 miles, was actually made up of 2 king-grade high-grade divine formations. It was extremely powerful. The 2-in-1 formation not only had a powerful sealing and suppressive power, it also had a powerful offensive power. With the help of this powerful grand formation, the 4,000 disciples of the Pine Crane clan were very confident that they could annihilate the 8,000-strong army that was about to arrive. Patriarch Song He and the other elders had participated in the entire process of setting up the grand formation. They saw it clearly and deeply felt how complex, exquisite, and powerful the grand formation was. Originally, they had thought that Ji Tianqing was already very impressive to be able to complete a king-grade high-grade divine formation in 4 hours. Now, they knew that Ji Tianqing had actually set up 2 king-grade high-grade arrays in 4 hours. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would not have believed it. This was simply a miracle. Since Ji Tianqing had accomplished this feat, Patriarch Song He and the other elders were even more relieved. They were even more confident that they could annihilate the 4 reincarnation divine generals and the 8,000-strong army. Soon, a ray of light appeared on the horizon. The sky was about to brighten. The deacons and disciples of the Pine Crane tribe who were patrolling outside also returned to the grand formation. Ji Tianqing said to Patriarch Song He and the other elders, "Based on the time, the 8,000-strong army should be arriving soon. I will now activate the grand formation and pass down the order for everyone to prepare to conceal themselves." If the 4,000 disciples of the Pine Crane tribe were to conceal their auras, it would be very difficult for them to escape the detection of the 4 reincarnation divine generals and the 8,000-strong army. Before the 8,000-strong army entered the ambush, they would discover the danger. Therefore, Ji Tianqing had considered this point when he set up the grand formation. He added the effect of concealment and aura concealment in the grand formation. After he finished speaking, he waved his hand and shot out a divine light to activate the grand formation. Patriarch Song He also quickly ordered the 4,000 disciples of the Pine Crane tribe who were still recuperating to be alert immediately. Thanks to the thousands of disciples of the Pine Crane tribe who were already in position when the grand formation was set up. Now that they had finished their meditation and did not need to get into formation, they did not waste much time. Soon, the grand formation was fully activated. A 5-colored light shield with a radius of 10,000 miles shrouded the entire area. Ji Tianqing, Patriarch Song He, and the 4,000 disciples of the Pine Crane tribe were all enveloped by the grand formation. After a short while, the colorful divine light shield gradually faded away and disappeared into the darkness of the night. In actual fact, the grand formation did not disappear but was completely concealed. Not only was it invisible to the naked eye, it could not be detected using soul trace as well. Along with it, the 4,000 over people in the grand formation disappeared as well. Even if it was an 8th or 9th stage realm God King expert, if they passed by this area, they would not be able to discover any abnormalities without careful investigation. This was the grand formation set up by Ji Tianqing and it was extraordinarily marvelous. The 4,000 disciples of the Pine Crane tribe were under the protection of the grand formation and did not know the profoundness, so their reactions were still considered calm. Whereas Patriarch Song He and the few elders were all strong practitioners and could clearly sense the marvelous effects of the grand formation. They were all astonished. At the same time, the more remarkable Kenshin's performance was, the more confident and calm they were. 15 minutes later, the sky turned bright and a new day had arrived. 30 minutes later, the sun rose slowly and the sky became clear. The 4,000 disciples of the Pine Crane tribe had been waiting patiently and were on alert at all times. Right at this moment, in the sky tens of thousands of miles away, a 5-colored divine light lit up. From 20 to 30,000 miles away, they could see 4 divine warships that were thousands of feet long. They were arranged in a formation and were speeding over at a moderate speed. The 4 divine warships were similar in style. They were completely black and had a sharp appearance. They were filled with the intention of attacking and killing. The body of the divine warships was also engraved with the same pattern. With Ji Tianqing and Patriarch Song He's understanding, they could tell at a glance that it was the insignia of the Blood Hell Marshal. It was naturally not the Blood Hell Marshal who came. It was the 4 reincarnation divine generals under the Blood Hell Marshal and the 8,000-strong army. From the calm and steady attitude of the 4 divine warships, they did not know that the Pine Crane tribe had fought back and the messenger group had been killed. Even though the 4 divine warships also showed vigilance and alertness, they were not strict enough and did not check the surroundings carefully. As a result, the 4 divine warships flew into the ambush under the watchful eyes of the 4,000 Pine Crane tribe members. The deacons of the Pine Crane race also led their 4,000 disciples to form a battle formation. They unleashed divine arts that blotted out the sky and bombarded the 4 divine warships. Swish! Swish! Whoosh! In an instant, tens of thousands of sharp blades of divine light, wind, fire, and lightning enveloped an area of thousands of miles and poured down like a torrential flood. After the 4 divine ships fell to the ground, they had been desperately trying to return to the night sky. Seeing that the Pine Crane tribe had launched an attack, the 4 Samsara immortal generals did not hesitate any longer. They hurriedly gave the order to counterattack. And they also shouted, roared, and waved their divine weapons. They used all kinds of special skills to counterattack. The soldiers operating the 4 divine warships also hurriedly activated rows of divine cannons, releasing dazzling beams of light that blasted toward the Pine Crane tribe. A large-scale battle between 10,000 people thus began. Boom! 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 In the next moment, the divine powers and secret arts released by both sides, as well as the sharp blades of divine light that filled the sky, collided violently. Logically speaking, the reincarnation divine general had double the number of people of the Pine Crane tribe. They should have the absolute advantage. But the result of the first round of battle was beyond everyone's expectations. With a deafening explosion, the sky was filled with divine light shards. The divine skills of both sides dissipated. After a round of head-on clashes, they were actually evenly matched. No one had the upper hand. 200 to 300 people from both sides were injured. Dozens of people were killed on the spot. The 4 divine generals of Samsara were stunned by this result. The 3,000 people of the Pine Crane tribe were also stunned. They found it unbelievable. But they only froze for a moment before they realized what was going on. It was the formation that spanned 10,000 miles. It was the divine formation's credit. Both sides were in the divine formation. The Pine Crane tribe was not affected at all. But the 8,000 soldiers were restrained and suppressed by an invisible force. Their combat power was reduced by half. Understanding that, the Pine Crane tribe was full of confidence. They shouted with high morale and launched the second round of attack. The 4 reincarnation divine generals realized the problem and changed their strategy immediately. We can't fight the Pine Crane tribe in this formation. It's not good for us. You two lead the soldiers and block the attacks of the Pine Crane tribe. I'll study this formation and destroy it as soon as possible. In the blink of an eye, the leading white-haired elder gave out the task decisively. But before they could carry it out, there was a sudden change. Swoosh! 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 4 dazzling golden swords appeared above everyone's heads in the night sky. They slashed at the 4 godly ships that had crashed to the ground. Each golden sword was thousands of feet long. They were condensed and contained a terrifying aura that could destroy everything. There was also an invisible pressure from the heavenly Tao. Sensing the power of the 4 swords, the 4 reincarnation divine generals were dumbfounded. Their eyes were filled with terror. They knew that the power of the 4 swords was terrifyingly powerful. Even if it was a 9th stage realm expert like Commander Mingi or Marshal Blood Prison, they would absolutely not be able to display such a valiant divine ability. It was highly possible that this was the work of a peak godly king. At the thought of this, the 4 reincarnation divine generals were horrified. At the same time, they finally understood why the Pine Crane tribe was so confident and arrogant. With the help of a peak godly king, they indeed had the right to be arrogant and take the initiative to attack. Boom! 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 The next moment, the 4 dazzling golden swords accurately struck the 4 godly ships. As expected, the 4 king-grade upper-grade godly ships were split into 2 on the spot. Shards and godly lights splattered everywhere. The 200 soldiers who stayed behind to guard the godly ships were all killed without exception. They were smashed into pieces. The 4 godly ships were destroyed. They could not provide firepower support to the 8,000 soldiers and also cut off the possibility of them escaping. This scene terrified the 8,000 soldiers and their morale dropped by more than half. The 3,000 over Pine Crane tribe members saw the terrifying power of the golden swords and knew that it was the work of a mysterious expert. They became even more excited and agitated. They launched an attack with high morale. Ji Tianqing did not stay idle. After destroying the 4 godly ships with one move, he continued to remain invisible. He waved his hand and shot out a few sword lights towards the 4 reincarnation divine generals. Book Guest Residence Reading Website. Chapter 42:15. Swish. 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 4 beams of golden sword light appeared in the seemingly empty night sky and attacked the 4 reincarnation divine generals. The reincarnation divine generals, who were still frightened, immediately pulled themselves together and used all their strength to defend themselves. Some took out several divine weapons, some used all their strength to form shields, and some used all their strength to attack the golden sword light. The 4 reincarnation divine generals had different reactions, but the result was the same. Bang! 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 The collision of divine skills created an earth-shattering sound. Shards of divine light splashed all over the sky and created a violent hurricane. The 4 reincarnation divine generals, who were in the 8th tier of the divine king realm, were all sent flying by the golden sword light. Blood spurted out of their 7 orifices as they crashed heavily into the ground 1,000 miles away. Therefore, a few more unlucky mountains were smashed into ruins by the 4 reincarnation divine generals. Puff, blurg, the 4 reincarnation divine generals were covered in blood and dust. They struggled to crawl out of the ruins, but they couldn't stop vomiting blood. Their opponent had only used one move to severely injure them and mess up their divine power. Therefore, they were right. Their opponent was definitely a peak divine king. But the question was, which peak divine king was it? Why didn't he show up after using 2 moves in a row? Not even a trace of him. No one on the reincarnation island could use such a miraculous art of invisibility and hiding one's aura. These thoughts flashed through the 4 reincarnation divine generals' minds as they suppressed their injuries. They analyzed and speculated the opponent's identity. But no matter how they speculated, they couldn't suspect Kenshin. Because no one would have thought that Kenshin had already arrived on the reincarnation island and saved the Pine Crane tribe in such a timely manner. On the other side, the battle between the Pine Crane tribe and the army of 8,000 had reached an intense and chaotic state. After witnessing the destruction of the divine worship and the reincarnation divine generals being sent flying and vomiting blood, the 8,000 elite soldiers were terrified and uneasy. Their morale dropped to a freezing point. Moreover, they had been suppressed by the formation and couldn't use half of their combat power. Therefore, although they had twice the number of people compared to the Pine Crane tribe, they were evenly matched and even in a passive situation. The 4 reincarnation divine generals had just crawled out of the ruins and returned to the night sky. They were about to gather together and work together to fend off the mysterious expert hiding in the dark to prevent the other party's attack. At this time, Ji Tianqing attacked again. He punched out the dragon elephant divine fist with his left hand at a reincarnation divine general. His right hand pinched the sword finger and released all of his strength. 3 5-colored giant swords shot toward the 3 divine generals of Samsara. Throughout the entire process, he still did not show himself. Bang! Bang bang bang! The 4 heavily wounded divine generals of Samsara immediately came to their senses. They cast spells to resist and evade, but it was too late. Following 4 muffled explosions, the white-haired old man was blasted apart by the draconic elephant divine fist, turning into fragments that drifted down from the sky. The other 3 Samsara divine generals were also cut in half by the 5-colored giant sword. Their divine bodies quickly collapsed and disintegrated in the 5-colored divine light, turning into dust. In this way, the 4 Samsara divine generals were killed by Ji Tianqing in 2 moves. Moreover, after they died, not even their remains were left behind. Only a few dozen godhead fragments were left behind. This result not only shocked the 8,000 soldiers, but also caused them to lose their morale and their formation to be disrupted. Even Patriarch Pine Crane, the elders, and the deacons were caught off guard and were full of shock. In their eyes, the lofty, powerful, and honorable Samsara divine generals were experts that they could not provoke easily. They did not expect that the 4 Samsara divine generals together could not block Lord Kenshin's second move and were killed directly. What kind of joke was this? The battle had just begun, okay? The soldiers had just exchanged a few moves, and the 4 generals had already been blasted into dust. Was there still a need to fight this battle? wasn't it too easy to win? What happened next was just as Pine Crane had expected. After the 4 Samsara divine generals were killed, the soldiers under their command were scared out of their wits. They no longer had any fighting spirit and scattered in all directions. Not only did their morale drop, but they also lost their commander. They were like a sheet of loose sand. How could they fight? Ji Tianqing waved his hand and shot out a ray of golden light, collecting the godhead fragments of the 4 Samsara divine generals. Then, he controlled the formation to release tens of thousands of silver sword lights to kill the 7,000 soldiers who were frantically running away. Pine Crane's people also seized this opportunity to besiege and kill the fleeing soldiers quickly. The result was self-evident. The soldiers could not escape the formation's blockade, nor could they withstand the sword lights and the killing of Pine Crane's people. In less than 15 minutes, more than half of the 8,000 soldiers were killed. Only about 2,000 were left. These soldiers were completely terrified and broke down. They threw away their weapons and shouted that they wanted to surrender. In order to force the Pine Crane race to surrender and swear allegiance, he actually sent 4 reincarnation divine generals and 8,000 soldiers to attack ancient Pine Grotto Heaven. Commander Mingi even gave an order to strip all the assets of the Pine Crane race. He also wanted to capture all the people of the Pine Crane race and escort them to Yudu to be beheaded in public. Of course, this news was only half true and half false. The Pine Crane race had purposely made it up in order to incite public outrage and highlight Commander Mingi's cruelty. The Pine Crane race was about to be destroyed by Commander Mingi's cruel methods. Their tens of thousands of years of inheritance would be severed. The Pine Crane clansmen who weren't willing to sit and wait for death, from the chief and elders to the old, weak, women, and children, united and fought back. Luckily, before the 4 reincarnation divine generals and 8,000 soldiers arrived, the Pine Crane race had secretly contacted a few strong practitioners. Those few strong practitioners also yearned for freedom and peace. They were righteous people who weren't willing to be controlled and ordered around by Commander Mingi. They had long expected that Commander Mingi would make an example out of the Pine Crane race, so they had led thousands of elite soldiers to set up an ambush in ancient Pine Grotto Heaven. Thus, the battle was very intense, and the result was very satisfying. Thousands of Pine Crane clansmen, along with a few other strong practitioners, led over 5,000 disciples to set up a sealing formation in ancient Pine Grotto Heaven. Chief Pine Crane executed a brilliant plan to lure the 4 reincarnation divine generals and 8,000 soldiers into an ambush. Both sides started a fierce battle in the sealing formation. In the end, the 4 reincarnation divine generals were killed by Chief Pine Crane and the rest. The 8,000 soldiers were also completely wiped out. Not even their corpses were left behind. The Pine Crane race won the victory and protected their foundation that had been passed down for tens of thousands of years. This matter also proved that Commander Mingi and Blood Prison Marshal who had ruled Reincarnation Island and bullied the people for 1,000 years weren't that scary. Only those who dared to resist and didn't fear sacrifice could defeat power and win freedom and peace. Here, the Pine Crane race appealed to the hundreds of millions of people on Reincarnation Island, as well as the thousands of sects and factions. If they didn't want to continue being slaves, they had to unite and fight back. They had to overthrow the dark rule of the god of the underworld. Similar news was spreading rapidly across the Samsara Island. The various factions and the people of Reincarnation Island who heard the news instantly exploded. They were all discussing this matter excitedly. Many people found it hard to believe. They didn't expect the Pine Crane race to be so courageous and dared to resist Commander Mingi's orders. More people were guessing who the mysterious experts who had joined forces to help the Pine Crane race were. Who were the factions behind them? Most people's first reaction was, it had to be the other 4 ancient clans. Those 4 ancient clans were the same as the Pine Crane race. They had been stalling for time and refused to surrender to Commander Mingi. It seemed that they wanted to wait for the Kenshin to arrive. Then, they would swear allegiance to the Kenshin and overthrow the god of the underworld's rule. Although there was still no news from Kenshin, Commander Mingi couldn't wait any longer. He decisively attacked the Pine Crane race. Once Commander Mingi succeeded in wiping out the Pine Crane race, it would serve as a warning to the rest. Then, Commander Mingi would deal with the other 4 ancient clans one by one. To prevent this from happening, the 5 ancient clans could only secretly communicate and unite. They would advance and retreat together. This was the only way to resist Commander Mingi and stall for time until the Kenshin arrived. Many factions on Reincarnation Island were secretly excited at this thought. They were looking forward to seeing how Commander Mingi and the Blood Prison Marshal would react to the 5 ancient clans' resistance. What they wanted to know was how long the 5 ancient clans could last with such a powerful force united. Just like that, the atmosphere on Reincarnation Island changed. It was calm and oppressive before a storm, but now it was bustling with noise and excitement. The commoners spread the news and mentally supported the 5 ancient clans. Although they were looking forward to Kenshin's early arrival, they knew very well that even if Kenshin came to Reincarnation Island, he would first have to subdue the 5 ancient clans. All in all, the 5 ancient clans were the main force to resist Commander Mingi and the Blood Prison Marshal. On the other side, Commander Mingi and the Blood Prison Marshal were the first to receive the news. When they learned that the 4 Reincarnation Divine Generals and the 8,000 soldiers had been killed, they were so angry that their lungs were about to explode. They knew that the Pine Crane race was a tough nut to crack and wouldn't surrender easily. However, they didn't expect the Pine Crane race to be so unyielding and unafraid of death. Translator, Timothy_editor, Globeglotter. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.